This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at thebatmanuniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hi, this is Denny O'Neil.
This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
Hi, this is Bruce Timm.
This is Brian Q. Miller.
I'm Christy Mark.
Hi, this is Dwayne Swierczynski.
Hi, this is Gail Simone.
I'm Lee Gobbett.
This is Tara Strong, and you're listening to Batgirl to Oracle.
Gotham City, like any other large metropolis, abounds in girls of all shapes and sizes. Debutantes, nurses, stenographers, and librarians.
Gotham City Library, Miss Gordon speaking.
Lopez hair removal. This is Jose.
Holy transformation. 1 minute, plain Barbara Gordon, librarian and Commissioner Gordon's daughter. And the next minute, something new has been added. Batgirl, modeled after her idol, Batman.
Holy apparition! No, Boy Wonder, I'm Batgirl. You are no longer alone, Capes Crusaders.
It took me 3 years to track down the Jade Gato, and 3 more to figure out how to steal it.
Funny, it only took me 10 minutes to figure out how to snatch it back. No matter how you do it, crime doesn't pay, girls.
Salute, I am your host, Stella, and this is Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon Podcast, episode 184 for December MMXIX, and yes, it is the 10th anniversary. Batgirl to Oracle is brought to you by MileHighComics.com, your new and collectible comic book store. Mile High Comics has an inventory of over 5 million comics from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern age, and over 100,000 trade paperbacks. If you're not into the vintage stock, that's okay, because Mile High Comics also has a subscription service called the New Issue Comics Express, offering discounted price for comics ready to hit the shelves. So if you're looking for vintage back issues or a great modern subscription service, be sure to check out milehighcomics.com. I feel like there's some good juju going on. I found a good omen as I was shopping at Wegmans after my run this afternoon, because I saw the boss lady out in the wild, and that always brings such joy to my heart. And it was just nice talking to her. So it's a good omen. So here we are on a good omen night, hopefully, recording this 10th anniversary. And as with all of my other anniversaries, I'm pretty sure, I've brought these two ragtag people with me. I've got Donovan Morgan Grant and Joshua Lapin-Bertone.
Well, here we are.
Once again.
Batgirl the Oracle was filmed before a live studio audience.
Luckily not, because that would take quadruple the time that it will take tonight.
It's a terrible strain on their writer's chest.
But we'd have to give everyone sandwiches.
Yes, 10 years of you doing this show. You know, Batgirls have changed many writers, many artists, many guests, many creators, many milestones, but this is the biggest one yet. How are you feeling?
It's kind of crazy. I'm just thinking 10, it's a huge number, I think, for a podcast and any sort of internet thing. And to think that I've been consistently doing this for 10 years blows my mind. That it started off as a joke blows my mind. And going through the equipment that, I've gone through and the guests and interviews and everything. It's been a crazy 10 years. I can't believe it, frankly.
I think I joke almost every other anniversary show, but it would just be amazing to look at all the podcasts since you began that have launched and have like basically are not around anymore today, and like Batgirl the Oracle is still going while all these other shows have like tried and failed, which is an amazing legacy.
It's thanks to the listeners, really, because I do it for me. I guess 50% of the reason is doing it for me just because I get to trace Barbara Gordon's journey along with you guys. But if people weren't listening, if they weren't downloading and emailing and having conversations with me on and off the air, then there would be no point. So very much I am appreciative for you guys, obviously, and then everyone who's currently listening right now.
Now, which was the first anniversary that Josh and I started breaking into?
I'd have to look to see.
I think it's probably at least 5 years, because I remember we did like the Batman and Robin movie, we did Birds of Prey. I know we've done the last few, but I don't think we were there for I know we were there for the first one, and I don't think we were there for the second or third.
Well, we might have technically been there for the first one, because I think that was a call-in show. So we probably called in.
It might have been, yeah. It's been so long, thinking back to all of that. But you bring up a good point. That was one of the things, actually, I wanted to talk to you guys about is just, do you have any favorite Batgirl the Oracle podcast moments from these 10 years?
Do I?
Whoa.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I started talking about it, but one of my, a couple of my favorite podcasting, recordings ever are on BTO. The Robotex Chipper Spotlight, very near and dear to my heart and my mind. I genuinely think we did a great job with the Killing Joke. Rough as it was, and especially when we had John Ostrander on, was particularly very cool. Mm-hmm. And some choice quotes. I love the beginning of us doing Batgirl or Batman and Robin, where Josh was riffing on the suggestive title sequence, or us talking about the Birds of Prey pilot.
Oh yeah.
Various times. Yeah, no. There's been lots of fun times on this show. But what say you, Josh?
I could go on for 20 minutes, but I'm going to condense it so that it won't be 20 minutes. But there's just so many favorite moments. I love actually when Stella covered the last Batgirl story, that Batgirl one shot by Barbara Randall Kiesel, just because to me that was the big milestone for the podcast to get. That was the moment where every single Batgirl story before she became Oracle, minus flashback stuff that was done later, was covered. So that was the moment where I was okay, I don't remember what the quote was that I said to her, but I was all those times that I Babsplained to you all those years ago, you can go and kick my ass now because you've you've done more than surpass that. I don't want to pick too many moments that I was in because I feel that's egotistical, but I always love I always love being on for the anniversary shows. That's always fun, and there's always fun quotes from there. And then some kind of, I don't know what you would call these, multimedia BTO moments, BTO moments that go beyond the podcast. For example, this year, Stella doing the presentation at BGSU for the Batman conference. That was awesome. That was a live, when we say film before a live studio audience, that was literally Batgirl and Oracle film before a live audience.
Yeah.
That Comic-Con, which was, I want to say 2014, where Burnside Batgirl team was kind of doing this informal meet and greet, and Stella, buddied up with them and did a little interview with them on the staircase with their editor standing right there. That was really cool. And just anytime that I love the warm moments between Stella and, I say as if she's not here, and the creators, those early Brian Q. Miller episodes were, a favorite of mine. And I don't know, like I said, I can go on, so I'm just going to cut off right here.
Yeah, all of those interviews have just been such a blessing that I've gotten them, and that I feel like I've developed a pretty good relationship with the majority of the people that I've interviewed. The fact that I love Batgirl Year One so much, and I got to talk to their creators in my first year or so when I really didn't have much of a podcasting resume or article writing resume at all was so great. And Brian Q. Miller, and being able to talk to him a couple of times. And yeah, the hilarity that we always get into with some of these wacky episodes. And of course, Shipper Specials or Shipper Spotlight is certainly one of my favorite, just because that's near and dear to my heart with the shipping. And yelling at Donovan for some of his picks is always a lot of fun. And of course, I conquered No Man's Land this year, which was pretty insane, frankly. Or when was it? Maybe it was last year.
I think that was like the anniversary show last year. Weren't we doing No Man's Land?
Oh, as the last bit, yeah. So I think just being able to conquer that mega storyline, and looking at my Excel document and just seeing all of these comics, but slowly it's getting whittled down less and less. There's still a lot to cover, but yeah, it's just been a great ride. I'm hoping for more longevity, but hey, I made it 10 years, so one cannot fault me for that.
Think of all the children that have grown up and become Nightwing at that time.
I know. Yeah, I was thinking I should find if there's a child at my current school that was born on December 19th, 2009, since that was the first post, the first everything from Batgirl the Oracle. So just seeing if someone, it'd have to be in the lower school, but it'd be interesting if I could find somebody that was born on that day.
Well, I think when we were at Panera Bread, I mentioned something about Jacob, and you were like, Jacob's I forget what you said, but you said something he's either graduated college or something, and I was like, what?
Yeah, all those babies. I mean, he called in once. They're all old, and we're old with it.
He said he listened to you when he was in your 8th grade class, and that it blew his mind.
He's older than I was when you started.
Wow. Yeah, it's kind of weird to think about, for sure. Oh, well, these guys, it's funny that we're here together because we just spent a close 4 days together, 4.5, however you want to think about it, in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago. And so it'd be fun. I'm not going to do a whole Los Angeles special episode with music and all of that business, but just to talk about the sort of hijinks that we got into and things that happened before we get into the main event of this particular episode. So the reason why we went to Los Angeles was basically a shared birthday celebration, I would say, and then inviting Don along with us, so he got his birthday celebration in there early. And the main reason I was going, no offense, is to see the Gilmore Girls, the set at Warner Brothers where they filmed Gilmore Girls, because I love Gilmore Girls, and Josh betrayed me multiple times, at least 5 or 6 times, bringing random people to Warner Brothers. Josh has no association with Gilmore Girls. The strangers had no associations, and taking pictures by the gazebo, it just raised my ire. And so finally I was able to go and see it. But so that was the purpose. I don't know if we should go day by day quickly of what happened.
Maybe some of the highlights.
Yeah, so Thursday,
the adventure to get to the gazebo too, and how and how we finally got there, I think is kind of fun too, because there were some twists and turns.
Of course, yeah. So Thursday, that was my birthday, and Warner Brothers, that was the main event, and we were taking our little tour, and Lucifer was filming over there, and they were like, we can't go in that particular area. And while I thought that my short but yet strong fingers were about to curl around Josh's throat, we were able to actually walk through it because one of Josh and Don's editors from DC Comics was able to lead us through, so I did get that shiny moment. We got some tours of different DC Comics offices. We got free stuff without any prompting, really. It was just kind of thrust upon us. I think the first day was more of a shock for me anyways than the second day, because Joe, he just asked, do you read the omnibuses of Batgirl? I was like, oh yeah, but I only have the essential. And then he goes to this bookcase and pulls out 2 unwrapped Bronze Age Batgirl. And I thought, wow, okay. And then I left with an exclusive Batgirl statue as well. So that was astounding. I was pretty speechless. And I know Don was as well, because he was told that if he saw anything he liked, he could get it. And he's like, well, what about that?
And exactly that voice.
It was pretty close to that high. Yeah, the Nightfall Part 1 of that huge tome. And then my highlight, Warner Brothers was frankly my highlight. But when people ask me at my workplace what I did, I tell them I went to a burlesque show. As if that's the only thing that I ever did. So I do have to tell this long story, because I guess I was going through quickly my itinerary at a lunch time, but the burlesque show, I stop and I tell all these little details. It's important, I think, to understand. So when I say burlesque, think in your mind what you perceive that to be. In my mind, I thought can, Moulin Rouge, a little gam here and there. That's it. Okay, so we went to this restaurant/pub that was paying homage to the Rocketeer. So the mask was there, and then the back there's a large building that's in the shape of a bulldog. And we're in the main part of the pub restaurant for the majority of the time. You have to go up to the bar in order to order food. And I go up after Donovan, and Donovan comes up to me and says, once you order your food, come, I have to show you something. I'm like, okay. So I go to Donovan afterwards, and he points out this poster, and it's a woman in a barrel, which is interesting because the main restaurant actually looks like a barrel. And it says burlesque show, 3 dates. Lo and behold, 11/21, my birthday. A woman, which I still want to know her story, but this woman next to us says, oh, they're a lot of fun. And I said, oh, have you been in one? And she said, no, but I've gone to one. So I thought, okay, let's try this. I mean, it's 8 p.m. It's a restaurant. There are windows in this restaurant. What's the worst that could happen? We're waiting for someone to join us. We end up going in the back where there's a nice little heater and, of course, the Bulldog building. Donovan spies ice cream advertised on the Bulldog building. And even they give prices and everything. Don asked, do you want ice cream? I say, absolutely. We trot on back to there, and we wrench open the door, and lo and behold, a bunch of women and a man, for whatever reason, in various states of undress are there. They ask why we're there. We say we came for the ice cream. They say scram. So we thought, oh, okay, that's what it is. So we scurry on back. Now Don and I also had an adventure where we crossed 6 lanes of traffic trying to get to Starbucks for my birthday drink. But anyways, it's 8:45. The show's about to begin. The MC comes on, and the first thing he says to rile the crowd up is, who's ready to see some sparkly titties? Right at that moment, my stomach clenches, and I thought to myself, what have I done? He goes on to explain some rules, and I thought, who needs rules for a burlesque? They can dance and touch you. You may not dance and touch them. And I was getting nervous. Probably I started sweating, but no one noticed. So the first act comes out. All the girls, they're singing the classic from South Pacific, Gonna Wash That Man Right Out of My Hair. They have a quick release towel around them. I'm watching this. I'm waiting for the towel to drop, because I knew once it did, I would understand what I got myself into. So the towel does drop, and then now we know. So basically the burlesque, this one, their state of undress is pantyhose, no shirt, bra, but their nipples were covered with tassels, glitter, or pasties.
A callback to your joke from Gotham Chronicle like 5 years ago.
It does go back to that, yeah. So from then on, we just stayed for the first act. I think, I got really what I needed to see to say that I went to a burlesque show. Yeah, I would say most of the acts were pretty tasteful, with the exception of the one with the honey. And even someone sang. So we did have a discussion, of course, what place does burlesque have in this Me Too society, and the comparison between burlesque and strippers. So there was a bit of a discussion there. But overall, I mean, hey, I did see a burlesque show, so that's exciting.
Oh, are you happy for the experience, or if you could go back in time, would you not be there?
I think no, I wasn't so uncomfortable. It was just that first moment of not knowing. of what I was actually going to witness that made me super nervous. But otherwise, I'm happy to have experienced it. Do I need to potentially see it again? I don't think so. But
if you could go back, would you warn Dawn about the ice cream, or would you just kind of watch the fireworks?
I would warn Dawn about the ice cream, mainly because it was embarrassing for us and it was embarrassing for them. I mean, I don't want to walk in on someone. It's interesting, though, actually, because they're like, get out of here, but they're about to be naked anyways. So it was kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to unduly embarrass anyone. So I would have warned Donovan.
That was wild.
Let's go get some ice cream. It was like hijinks, yeah. So Friday, you want to take that one, Josh?
Yeah, Friday there's like, when we say we went to the DC offices, I guess like there was like 3 different technically DC offices that we went to, because on the Warner Brothers lot, which is where we went to Thursday, that's the DC Universe offices, which is like the app, that like has Titans and the comics and stuff like that. Friday, we went to the DC Comics, like the publishing building, like where the editors are, where Dan DiDio and Jim Lee have their offices, where they do licensing and toys. And that was, I think there was, how many floors did we go on? We went on 3 floors?
Yeah, 3 floors. 3 floors.
You know how like sometimes like, you're thinking, oh, this place is going to be like Willy Wonka. Then you get there and it's like a sterile office building or something. Like that was not DC. Like this office had personality. There was like everyone like had their cubicle decked out, like lots and lots of toys and like posters and stuff like that. That was really cool. And I want to. And there was, statues of like stuff like giant Funko Pops. We posed with like Green Lantern rings. And it can almost be considered not just like Stella and my birthday celebration, but also like to honor 10 years of BTO. Like Stella got to go to where it all happened, DC Comics. And before I talk about that closet at the end, any like, comments you want to make about like the DC offices or stuff that we saw in the offices?
There was just a moment where I think in the smack middle of our tour, where there was the first and second day, where I was like, I don't think I've ever actually thought I'd be here, but I was, and it was very, I felt very blessed being there.
I would just say I enjoyed seeing their cubicles and how they personalize them with different statues or posters or images. It's like the best place to work almost. Just you have total freedom of what you put up there.
Yeah, and I want to thank, Tim, who's one of my editors, who, took the time out to give us that tour. That was really nice. And the really cool part was, and if you're friends with us on social media, you might have seen this, at the end of the tour, they took us to this, like, closet, and they, like, unlocked the closet. And it was like a big
with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
Oh, gosh.
A big bookshelf of, like, omnibuses, deluxe editions, trade paperbacks, like hardcovers, soft covers, just like thousands of dollars worth of books. And we were told, help yourself, take what you can carry. And that was like something else. Like, and we all have like weight limits on our, checked bags. Did we actually go to the gym ever to like weigh our stuff, or did we just do it at the airport? I don't remember.
Someone did. I did not.
Yeah, I weighed mine at the airport, but like we had like pounds and pounds of like enough that like I had to like take some of the books out of my checked bag so that way I wouldn't get like a carry-on fee, and I was like holding them to the airport. Like we had like big and this was like the day after, Joe gave Stella those 2 Batgirl Bronze Age omnibuses, and like Donovan that Nightfall one. So like we were just like getting swag like throughout this trip. But that was that was a moment right there, like that I knit that my inner 12-year-old like would have fainted had this happen to me. Just open the closet, take what you can carry.
I will say that if you guys have been listening for 10 years, hopefully you can guess which of the 3 of us had the most self-control.
Show off.
I started cackling, I think. Well, I probably wasn't cackling, but I was laughing on the way out because they're struggling. Josh's pants are falling down, and I just have two hardcovers of stuff. So I thought that was pretty hilarious.
I put them on my bed when I got back to my apartment, and like the mattress started like caving in. They were so heavy. It was like 60 pounds of like books because some of them were omnibuses. Before Friday, I just want to mention the final DC office that we went to was DC has a talk show, if you're subscribed to DC Universe, called DC Daily. So we also went there. It's worth noting. And we got to see the costumes for a movie starring a character whose name we don't like to mention on this show. But it was directed by Todd Phillips. And, there was some cool stuff there. We posed in like a crime alley scene and stuff like that. I don't have too much to say about DC Daily. And it was funny because like Joe kept on apologizing, like, I'm sorry that this place isn't doesn't have a lot to it. And I was like, no, this is awesome. This is awesome.
And then that night,
we went to a live taping of the Connors because I was interested in seeing like kind of a sitcom taping or like any Warner Brothers television show taping. And Connors was interesting. It was John Goodman. And if you see this episode, I think they said it'll air in January or February. See if you can listen very closely for Donovan and mine's laugh. Stella did laugh, but not at what was going on in the show. She laughed because in between like takes, in between like John Goodman, making jokes about like his football team losing, we were like talking to each other, and I don't even remember how this came up, but we were teasing Don about like the days that he threw pizzas on the roof. And Don said, I haven't thrown a pizza in over 3 years.
No, I said I have not delivered pizza in 3 years.
And Stella and me started laughing, and like we were laughing at him so much that like Donovan, like he said, we're switching seats. You two aren't sitting together. We're switching seats.
it was like the parent trying to break up the noisy kids.
We're cackling like goblins. I never knew why.
Well, first it was because like someone was like standing up and cheering, and their stomach was like bare and like ready to like dig into.
Yeah, right by Donovan's head.
Yeah, but it's I don't even. It was like, what was the name of the episode? They said it was something called like throwing a Christian to the lion or something like that.
Oh yeah, it was something like that.
Yeah, so
to the Bears because of Chicago Bears.
Oh yeah, and that was interesting because I always wondered how like that live studio audience thing worked, because I was like, there's multiple sets. What do they do? Do they move the audience? Do they move the sets? Or like, and they do a lot to try and keep people from being bored. Like they brought out sandwiches at the halfway point, and in between scenes they have this kind of guy who's in the audience to like energize the crowd and like play games with them, and he did a really good job, I thought.
And yeah, so then we move on to Saturday.
Saturday was Universal, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
And, oh yeah, you ran into your ex.
Shut up. That was 2 years ago. We took the Universal tour, which was fun. It was ramping up.
I love how Don tells this story about the tour.
Have I told it before? I mean, like it's just fun how like
the way that you tell the story about the cliffhanger of the tour.
Yeah, because it's like the kind of ramp. The tour involved like created dangers from famous movies like The Jaws and Psycho, and various others. And it was ramping up near the end for this climactic finale with The Rock as Hobbs from Fast and Furious, and Tyrese Gibson and Michelle Rodriguez from Fast and Furious as like Roman and Lenny. And so like they're building toward this huge finale, and then like holograms show up, and you see like these like party girls dancing until the FBI shoots them away. And I'm rubbing my hands like, this is going to be brilliant, and I can't wait. And then like there's nothing going on, and like the person's like, oh, I'm sorry, we have to stop. There's some technical issues. But I had my fill. I thought that was hilarious, and that was a new wrinkle in Universal. Which was it's like the second time I've been to Universal. The first time was 2 years ago in Florida, but I enjoyed myself. I kind of stayed away from the roller coasters, but I still had a fun time.
We went through this zombie thing, which Stella said before the trip, what if there's a symbiote moment? And we never wound up going in the pool for Stella's symbiote moment, but I think it happened during the Walking Dead walkthrough.
Yes, I attached myself to Josh. That's what the symbiote moment is.
Shove me in front of both of you.
I think you ran in front. Well, first those strangers told us to go first, and I don't like that, but hey, we had to do it. Yeah, and then I remember going to the sock store and got some special socks. And that night is when we had our dinner for other people who were in LA, and we got to have Harold on, that this show doesn't know about, and from questions they don't ever have answers, and Jason, who has been on this show a couple times.
Hey, Harry has been on. He you yelled at him during your anniversary intro last year.
Yes, you're right. And then we come to Sunday, which was the climax of the weekend, I would say, because we hiked up to the Hollywood sign. And what a hike it was. It was glorious.
I love this.
It was rough at times. We did get offered a hit of ganja. We all passed, don't worry. But I think in that moment I thought, wow, this is really what California is like, isn't it? They were a lovely couple. I thought they were a lot of fun.
They were nice, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. We all made it. It was about 4.5 miles or so total, up and down. And it was just, great to be out there. And that's what I like to do, get the blood pumping and, that kind of thing.
Some of us are in shape. Some of us aren't. You could probably, if you've seen our pictures on Facebook, guess who struggled and who didn't.
Well, we left no man behind.
Saying, at some point I'm going to stop, and you never did.
That is true. That is true.
It was worth it for that view on the top, but oh boy, that was a very, very sobering experience to find out what my physical limitations are. And something that would be of interest to the Batgirl the Oracle audience is kind of as a warm up to the hike, at the bottom of the trail where the Hollywood sign is, there's I guess it's kind of like a 10-minute short hike to the Batcave entrance from the 1966 Adam West Batman series, right, which we posed in front of there.
Sure did. And then after that, we did have some food, and then we went in search of some stars. And I was trying to do it quickly because I knew these guys were tired and it was getting dark. And then at one point, Josh decided to wait in the car, which was fine. But then Don and I said, Don,
Josh was out of gas.
And I said, Don, we need to run to get these stars, which I literally meant run. So we were at the 6300 block. We ran all the way to 69, stopping along the way, dashing through crowds of people around the Chinese theater and coming around. I mean, we saw a woman yelling on the phone, calling someone some bad words, and the stranger telling us, "Welcome to LA." Yeah. And you remember that?
Totally
it was hijinks, man, just running and taking pictures of stuff. But I'm very happy that I got my Gone with the Wind people, got Judy Garland, Doris Day, got all classic vintage people. It was a lot of fun. And we also went to a giant Funko store, which probably would give Gerard some heart palpitations. But overall, that was a fun night. And then we capped it off watching Frozen 2
Electric
in the
Boogaloo.
theater. Electric Boogaloo. Yeah, I'm not sure who the Boogaloo is.
Yeah, with more colonization than ever.
I enjoyed it. I remember watching reviews on my phone as I was heading to the airport, that people were really kind of over the film. I thought it was fine, but I thought the first one was good too. So I have no horse in the race of which is better.
Yeah. And then we all went home on our various trips. I actually saw a colleague at Dulles. It was kind of scary. I'm grateful that I flew out on Monday because I was told that Tuesday LAX was a nightmare and getting to it was a nightmare. So I'm glad that I flew out on Monday. But when I got to Dulles, it was 8 p.m. and it was dead. And I thought, what is this? What's happening? So I guess fly out on Monday or Monday before Thanksgiving is the way to go. But then I just walked, and there at my terminal was one of my colleagues. So that was kind of fun to have the last leg with her. But overall, it was a lot of fun. I'm glad that I did it. Glad to see the Gilmore Girls. I'm grateful for the people that led us around. And you too, of course, for going along.
Yeah, I mean, and on the subject of Gilmore Girls, Joe really was the MVP, because when he found out that you went all this way for Gilmore Girls and you couldn't go to the gazebo, he literally walked us onto the set of Lucifer, because they were filming Lucifer there, and was here's your gazebo, have at it.
Took so many pictures. Yeah.
How was your
for us
back home, Stella? Because mine was turbulent as hell.
Oh, my flight to LA was actually rather turbulent. I think mainly because of the Chicago situation, but the flight back was not as bad. So maybe where did you was it a one stop or 0 stops?
We would it was a lot of dipping and a lot of there's one point where we just dropped for 2 seconds and everyone's yelped. I guess it grabbed onto the lunch tray for the rest of the hours. It was awful. Why are you laughing?
Oh my gosh! Wait, did you have a layover somewhere? Did you go to another airport before you went to Nashville?
No, it was a straight flight.
Okay.
They did threaten to stop down in Phoenix because the wind was so bad, but they never did.
Oh yeah.
So
wow,
I just sweated it out for 3 hours and.
I had a very turbulent flight, and I've mentioned, I don't know if I've ever mentioned on this show, I fly all the time, but I am terrified of flying because I saw Final Destination when I was in like 9th grade. And ever since then, like airplanes have scared me, but like we live in the world that we live in. So like I have to go on them like at least like, a few times a year. And every time I do, I'm scared. So like this plane was like shaking and I was like giving myself mathematical scenarios in my head. Like statistically speaking, I am safer up here than I am on the road. I am safer. Like, but it's like your brain knows that, but your like emotions are like, I am going to die.
Well, luckily we all made it. I guess my turbulence was just on the way there and not on the way back. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your fun moments. And LA was certainly, it was a lot of great fun. We're here now, of course. We always do some sort of, I think each time we've not done like a regular arc. And I gave them the option. I said we can do a regular Birds of Prey arc or we can do maybe something controversial, and that's Huntress Cry for Blood. And they both wanted to do that because, of course, I've been in my own, well, I have people with me, Tom's with me, Carolyn's with me. But, of course, I take a different stance on Huntress, so it should be interesting going into this. And I did warn them, there are always rules with these two jokers, that we do have to come in objectively. So don't go in already hating Huntress or thinking she's wrong. So
we don't hate her.
Okay. Looking at this story holistically. So it was a 6-issue miniseries, ran from June 2000 to November 2000. The synopses have been gathered from DC Wikia, so thank you. And the gentleman will be reading the synopses, and then we shall talk about this particular story. So I think, Don, did you have the first 3 or the last 3? I couldn't recall.
I took the first 3.
Okay. So the creators for all 6 parts are the same. Writer Greg Rucka, artist Rick Burchett, and colorist Tajana Woods. So, Don, you're up for parts 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, part 1. Batman is at the scene as the police recovers the dead body of Claudio Panessa out of the Gotham River. Crossbow bolts are sticking out of his chest, and this makes Huntress an immediate suspect. Another connection is the fact that Panessa is the cousin of Helena Bertinelli. Therefore, Batman breaks into Helena's apartment and confronts her directly. She denies having anything to do with the murder as the tension between Batman and her continues to grow. She's still angry that Batman never accepted her into his quote-unquote family. After Batman has left, Helena thinks about the history of her family. Her great-grandfather, Giuseppe Bertinelli, came from Sicily to Gotham City about a century ago and established his mafia family, which ruled Gotham with 4 other families: Galante, Casamento, Beretti, and Enzerillo. Tommaso Panessa wanted his family to become the 6th member, but Alfredo Bertinelli, Giuseppe's successor and Helena's grandfather, rejected him. And that did not change even after his son Franco Bertinelli married Tommaso's little sister Maria. Franco eventually succeeded Alfredo as the boss of bosses and became father of Pino and Helena. When Helena was 8 years old, both of her parents and brother were killed right before her eyes. The Panessas took care of Helena and sent her to Sicily. The Galantes took over the lead of the families, and the Panessas were allowed to join the group. Helena did not learn about her mafia heritage before she was 15 years old. In the evening, Helena decides to visit her family to offer condolences. Members of mafia families of all over are present at the Panessa estate, and Helena overhears that they are also talking about the Huntress. Pasquale Galante Jr., the current boss of bosses, and most others are happy to see Helena. Only her cousin Monica Panessa does not accept her as part of the family. Driving home, she nearly runs over a faceless man who is standing on the road and seems to be waiting for her. Dun, dun, dun. Part 2. Huntress knows a faceless guy waiting for her on the road as the Question. The man implies that Helena is still struggling with her double identity. Next day at work, Helena thinks about her potentially being exposed as the Huntress by Batman. Both the Mafia as well as the GCPD would come after her immediately. At the same time, Nightwing is with Oracle, and they talk about Helena being guilty of murdering Claudio Panessa or not. Oracle dislikes Huntress and thinks she's guilty, but to her dismay, Nightwing disagrees. He leaves and visits Helena at her apartment, offering his help, but she angrily refuses because she has not forgotten how she was treated by the Batman family during No Man's Land. After Dick
Neither have I, Huntress. Neither have I.
They're bringing it up. I'm not bringing it up. They're bringing it up. After Dick leaves, Helena suits up and is in search for the female reporter Karen Fraser, who recently wrote a negative article about her as a Huntress. Helena suspects that Fraser got paid by the mob of Gotham City, but she finds the reporter dead in her apartment with crossbows in her chest, and she flees the scene just as the police arrive. She runs right into Batman and Nightwing. Batman wants her to come with him as the police is already on the scene. Huntress misunderstands his intentions and tries to flee, but when Batman throws something at Huntress, she mistakenly fires her crossbow. The bolt is about to hit Nightwing, but Batman shoves him out of the way and gets hit himself. Furious, Nightwing attacks Huntress.
Now Batman becomes Rick Grayson instead.
He loses his memory. Nightwing attacks Huntress, who reacts by jumping off the roof into the nearby river. The Question fishes her out of the water, but when she also refuses help, he knocks her out. Part 3! Helena wakes up in a cabin in Canada. A man named Richard Dragon tells her that the Question brought her there. Question calls Dragon Sensei and introduces himself as Vic Sage. After a week, she's vanished. Robin visits Oracle to talk about the murder cases involving Huntress. Robin thinks Helena is innocent and wants to find out the truth. Both him and Oracle dig deep into the past of Helena. After her parents and brother were killed, all other Bertinellis were eliminated as well. Vic explains to Helena that Richard is a kind of teacher who shows people how to live. He warns her not to go back to Gotham when her injuries are healed, because she will probably die within a few days. Then Vic leaves so that Helena can be taught by her new sensei. The training over the following weeks is both mental and physical, so that Helena better understands who she really is. After 3 months, Vic returns because it's now time for her to return to Gotham. As they are waiting at a bus station, Vic wants to know how Helena became the Huntress.
And that's just what he finds out in Part 4. So while traveling back to Gotham City by bus, Helena Bertinelli explains to Vic Sage the events that took place after her parents and her brother had been killed, as the other Bertinellis got wiped out as well. Oh man, all these Italian names. All right, let's see how I do. Which is funny because I'm part Italian. Tommaso Panessa? Sure. Decided to bring Helena to Sicily so that his nephew Sal Acero could take care of her. As a young girl, Helena did not understand anything about the family business, but she observed how the Aceros trained themselves in gun shooting and in hand-to-hand combat. It doesn't say in this recap, but they also said, "You must never go in the barn. It is forbidden." Because Helena was continually having scary nightmares, Sal decided to train her so that Helena felt she could defend herself. That was how she first learned how to use that crossbow. So one day, the Aceros and the other mafia members were arrested, so Helena was sent to a boarding school in Switzerland. There, she found out that her family consisted only of criminals. At the age of 16, she returned to Gotham City to spend some time with her Uncle Tommaso and the rest of the family during a Christmas holiday. But the event was disturbed by none other than Batman. This set an example for Helena that one could fight crime, and the Huntress was born. So in the present day, Helena and Vic finally arrive at her apartment in Gotham City. But who is there? Spoiler, it's Batman. So, which leads us into Part 5. After 3 months, Huntress is back in her apartment in Gotham City, accompanied by Question. Batman's like, "Where were you?" So he waits her in her apartment and tries to ease the tension, which usually is between them. He knows she did not intend to shoot him with the crossbow. Well, yeah, she was aiming for Nightwing. No, I'm just joking. And that the murder accusations on her are wrong as well. Batman offers to give her enough room to clear her name as long as she does not clash with the GCPD. Shortly after Batman is gone, Robin shows up and interrupts a romantic moment between Helena and Vic. Robin tells her that he reviewed Helena's history together with Oracle and hands all the files to her. After that, Robin swings on the roof of the building where Batman and Nightwing are waiting for him. Dick is eager to talk to Huntress. Like, no, dude, she's got another guy in there. But Batman wants her to figure out everything on her own. Meanwhile, Helena tells Vic what she did after she had witnessed Batman for the first time. She went to the University of Palermo? Sure. Mm-hmm. And studied anything that was mafia related. Yeah, I remember it said she majored in mafia or something like that until I remember the book saying that, until eventually returned to Gotham City. The killer of her parents is already dead, but Helena still cannot answer the question why she was spared. While Helena looks at all the files Robin gave her, Vic goes outside to take care of a man who is obviously observing the apartment. Vic finds out he works for Santo Casamento. This suddenly makes sense because Helena just looked at the picture, which was taken by the FBI, and shows her mother together with Casamento. Helena puts on her costume and asks Casamento straight on what his relationship with her mother was. And he points out the obvious. He's Helena's father, which leads us... because that's her father on Earth too. Part 6. Helena has confronted Santo Casamento regarding an old photo showing him together with Helena's mother, Maria. Casamento claims he's Helena's father. By the way, like he's also like, oh, and I know that Helena Bertinelli is the Huntress. The recap doesn't explicitly state that, but like, yeah, he knows who she is. According to him, Maria was treated badly by her husband, Franco, and thus she found comfort in him. When the Sicilian mafia boss Stefano Mandragora, ordered him to wipe out the Bertinelli, Santo passed on the order, but with the condition to, quote-unquote, spare the sister. Now, he meant to spare Tommaso's sister, Maria, but the assassin misunderstood and spared the little sister, which was Helena. So this fueled Santo's hate for Helena, and by trying to frame her, he actually wants her to use her abilities for his criminal business. So later, Huntress stands on the roof thinking about these revelations. She's approached by Nightwing, who confirms what Casamento told Helena, because Batman ran a DNA test. Creepy. Backed into a corner, Helena decides to accept the invitation to the wedding of her female cousin Monica, and she will be accompanied by Vic Sage. Helena takes advantage of a Sicilian tradition and asks a favor from her uncle Tommaso Panessa. We don't know what the favor is yet, but we find out later on. Over the next few days, Helena not only busts up her new brother, Mario, but also makes Santo Casamento take his place to make a deal. But in a warehouse at the pier, it's Tommaso Panessa awaiting Santo. He kills him in retribution for the death of his sister. Helena calls the police so that Tommaso gets arrested. The question is still more than unhappy that Huntress got Santo killed, although she did not do it herself directly. And the recap doesn't say, but he kind of like walks off in disgust. And Helena, she takes off like pieces of her uniform and her rosary, and she like throws it into the river, implying, could this be the end of the Huntress? Who knows? But it is the end of the recap.
Very true. Well, before we start getting into the questions, what's your history with this particular story?
Ooh, mine's very quick because I've read it before. I remember reading it at Borders. 'Cause it was collected back then. I've not read this in a very long time. Oh, the only thing I knew was that like it involved, Helena was the main character. It involved her background. I remember the question being in it. And that was really, I think I maybe remembered Richard Dragon. I know I've read this before, but it was only once a long time ago. So this was basically me reading it for the first time again.
Yeah, I had one of those moments where I realized just how old I was because I was like, oh, I remember reading the first issue or two of this New on the Stands. And I was like, so, yeah, I read this. And then I did the math 19 years ago. Oh, that's a long time. But like I could clearly remember being like, I guess I would have been, a teenager. And this was, months after No Man's Land had ended. And one thing about No Man's Land is like, that was kind of a redemption story for the Huntress. So I was like, okay, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. In terms of history, I don't know if this part is better for like later discussion, but I was actually like very upset at part 1 because of there's like a continuity detail. It's not necessarily a continuity. I mean, I'll just say it now instead of like later. But like Batman goes into Helena's apartment and he like clearly knows her identity, where it doesn't necessarily come out of nowhere if you look at other books, because there's like a Justice League Secret Files issue before this where like he leaves a note in her apartment and like he sees her without her mask. Not that her mask hides a lot in No Man's Land.
No Man's Land.
Right. But like this was like directly like he knows who she is and he's making reference to like her. And I was like, we never saw this moment because like previously it had been like Nightwing and Robin knew who she was. And that was the secret that they kept from Batman. And they even like talk about that in Nightwing issue 25. Like, so you know her real name too. Like, yep, but Batman doesn't. That's our little secret. So it's not out of bounds that he would figure it out. But I remember like at the time as a teenager reading this book, that's like my clear memory of like reading issue 1 is like, how does Batman know who Huntress is all of a sudden? And Huntress later found out Batman's identity off panel in a similar way years later.
Quid pro quo.
Oh my God.
This is my history. This is the first time I'm reading it. I had heard of the title before. Someone even recently asked if I was going to cover it. And I thought, yes, but how strange that you're asking if I'm going to cover it because, it's a Huntress story. Oracle only appears in 2 issues? I won't reveal yet what my grade is, but it was certainly interesting. And here it is on Batgirl the Oracle for its 10th anniversary. Well, I do want to talk about the covers and art, first of all, before we get into many questions and points that I want to cover. So the covers, well, I very much enjoy them. They all have, I would say, the same format. Batman Huntress, of course, and they all have a particular question or quote or a lead-in right on the left, and then just really interesting things. So the first one, you've got Helena, her hands are bloody, Batman's behind her. You've got Batman in number 2, bloodied, he's got holding the crossbow. Questions behind her in 3, and she's training a little girl that almost looks like Cassandra Cain from afar.
Yeah.
Holding a crossbow in number 4, Huntress and question with little itty bitty people in their hands. And then, of course, at the very end, you're wondering about what the state of her soul is, because in number 6, she's standing over a dead body. So yeah, what are your thoughts on just this cover set that they have for these 6 issues?
I really liked them. I remember these covers. I specifically remember like the first 3 covers. But like you point out part 4, which looks like a kind of a small Cascade with a crossbow. Now I know that's Helena, but that's my favorite one. Like, I love that title.
Of course it is.
Well, it's not the Cassandra Cain thing. It's like, once there was a little girl who learned to hate, and like, this is this small girl with like knee-high socks, so she looks like she's, I don't know, there's an implication that she's like either, from a certain school, or she's not American or whatever, and she's holding this crossbow that's far too big for her, and the bat signal is like right under her on the floor. I was like, that is so cool. So, I mean, some of the covers are, like people fighting and stuff, but like that cover, the cover to 3 where she's like kicking down like the wooden dummy with the question in the background, the cover to 2 where Batman's like against the kind of the roof thing where he's shot with a crossbow. Like, these are really cool. I really like, I'm glad you asked this question, because I can like genuinely say I really love these.
These are very dynamic covers, and they're not like other covers that were on the stand at the time, because like it kind of has its own dress for the miniseries and its own little stylistic choices across, all the covers. And I love, I'm going to try and pull it up right now. I love Helena's face and the cover for issue 1, because like her face and Batman's face, like he's like, well, talk your way out of this one, Huntress. There's blood on your hands. So like that made me laugh when I was looking at it. But yeah, no, I love these covers.
And then the interior art. What are your thoughts on the art by
Rich Burchett? Yeah, Rich Burchett. Yeah. I'm mainly familiar with his like Batman Adventures stuff. He did I think the first several issues of Batman Gotham Adventures. I think he even did like the Dan Slott Batman Adventures stuff. So, and he did that issue in No Man's Land where Batman and Gordon talked at Gordon's house. So, it's interesting for me because I'm usually seeing his work adapting the animated stuff, because it kind of has, it's not very cartoony here, but it's also kind of stylized a little bit. Like it's very realistically rendered, but there are times where people kind of bug out and they kind of have funny looks on their faces. I like this artwork. It's kind of natural and understated. This is kind of around the time of the Batman books where a lot of the artwork had everyone look kind of more natural. They're not overtly muscular. They're not overtly sexualized. Like, I mean, I think Helena looks like a normal person in this. Mm-hmm. And so do like Batman and Nightwing. Like, they don't look like they're like, uber jacked either. Like, it's actually kind of interesting because like there's that newspaper clipping of like an artist.
Yes. The Huntress?
Yeah,
the artist rendering?
Yeah, exactly. And she has like, it's almost like a Rob Liefeld like X-Men in the 90s. Like, she has like these big like,
when she's got like the double guns on like that news report, like the Huntress is considered armed and dangerous.
Yeah,
and sexy.
Really muscular and all kind of stuff. And like, it's a good contrast to how she's depicted here, where it's like, I mean, I didn't notice a single instance of cheesecake in this, which I think honestly was common around this era, like the Joe edited era of Batman comics. So I really enjoyed the artwork, especially where like whenever we saw the question, and like I thought he was illustrated very well whenever Vic Sage was under the mask.
Yeah, I like the art in this. I'm not very good about talking about reasons why I like the art, but I thought the flashbacks were, nice and stuff. The way that they were drawn, and I like the expressive look on people's faces. Like, there's a few times where Helena like kind of gives Batman like a please look, like in like that first issue when he's at her apartment, that I liked.
I mean, that's par for the course.
Yeah, but I mean, it was drawn like very expressively. Like, she looks more like sly instead of like like instead of like angry or like or something like that.
I feel like the art really fits the tone of the story. It has a noir feel to it. It also fits, I think, the Italian aspect, and the roots of that family. The flashbacks, I think, are done really well, where it changes a little bit, has a sepia tone,
yeah.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a Tim Sale feel to it. Like, if I opened this up and I didn't know, I could be like, oh, is it Batman Long Halloween? You know, there's a bit of that. But I think it's really beautiful, and I think it really matches the subject matter within and the culture as well. So I think that it's really great. It's probably one of my favorite things that I've read that I didn't know I was going to read. So.
I agree with you about like the non-Halloween collection, because when she started listing off like all the mafia members, I was literally thinking, I've read this before in Long Halloween.
There you go.
Yeah, when like someone's name was Alfredo, I was like, another Alfredo mafia guy. Okay.
Of course. Well, since we are talking, of course, stories, we've got narrators. And our narrator for this whole story, with the exception of maybe some changes, is, of course, Huntress. So what is your thought of using Huntress as a first-person narrator, not having maybe a third-person narrator narrating the story? Can you trust her as much? What are your thoughts?
I've not listened to every episode of Required Reading, but I've listened to some episodes where you ask, well, can we trust the narrator? I was like, it's her story. You know, it says Batman Huntress to sell it, but like it says Huntress' story. We've joked a lot about like, this has been going on for a few years now, about like the whole Huntress as a character and, you know, what Batman thinks of her, that kind of thing. But I've always liked the character. I really liked her in this, especially with how the first couple pages opened up with, like, you know, they all think they know me. None of them know a damn thing. They think they know what I want, why I do what I do, but they don't. They've never have. They've never even tried to figure it out.
That's in the trailer for Rise of Skywalker, because, like, Adam Driver walks out, but I do.
In the rain. I don't know. I think that, like, Greg Rucka, he's a writer that clearly likes strong women. He's written, he wrote Gotham Central, Renee Montoya. He's written Wonder Woman. So he takes these female characters seriously. He's not trying to, like, you know, do anything but do that. And I think for a character who is in the world of Batman, a controversial figure in terms of, like, you know, like what the characters think of her, I thought her voice checked out because she was, you know, clever and insightful, and, you know, she had a lot of, like, pathos with her past, but she's still, I don't want to say hot-headed, but she's still aggressive. And that's something that I think is important for this version of Helena Bertinelli, is that, like, she's not somebody who's very passive. And I think that he kept that intact without her coming down as some sort of, like, you know, negative female stereotype or somebody who was unintelligent. So I thought because he wrote it well, she was a great choice for a first-person narrator.
Yeah, I mean, it's her series, so I would want her to be in the narrator, especially because we would lose a lot if, like, someone else was narrating this, because there's so much revelations for her that, like, we'd really want to get in her head for. So, like, if this was, like, the Question narrating it, like, we wouldn't know how she was, like, taking all this news about her family and everything. I think she's a reliable narrator, because comics very, very rarely do the whole unreliable narrator thing. Like, that's done once or twice, but it's kind of like the exception to the rule. So Helena really has no reason to, like, lie in her own head. The only time where it's like, where I think you would wonder if you can trust her is when she's narrating, like, the opinions of other people. She's like, oh, Batman thinks this of me, or Nightwing thinks this of me, like, etc. Like, but that's her opinion. So, like, you know, even then, like, she's not being unreliable. She's speaking to her experience, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another part of that question I'm trying to remember. But there was one part, and this reminded me of Bruce Wayne Murder or Fugitive, which happened like a year or two later, where, like, there was parts in Bruce Wayne Murder or Fugitive where, like, Batman never denies killing Vesper, and, like, there was something similar in this where, like, the internal dialogue, like, it took until, like, I think issue 2 until Honda says, oh, I didn't kill that guy, by the way. But, like, the narration was, like, really vague for the first part. She's like, someone's dead, and they have an arrow in them, and people are saying it's the Huntress, and I'm like, but it isn't. Say, but it isn't. And like she and maybe she did, and I just missed it the way I was, like, reading it, because you know how sometimes, like, your brain will, like, autocomplete, like, certain sentences or, like, skim something, but, like, when I don't have any memory of her denying that in the first issue.
Yeah, that's actually my next question. So
okay. So,
I won't skip ahead there.
Okay, so that wasn't okay. Got it. Well, then let's go ahead to the next question then.
Okay, well, I'll just say as narrator, even though Donovan criticized me, apparently, it's a legitimate question to ask if the narrators are reliable, especially in terms of memoir. Persepolis, that was a legitimate question because it's a child narrator, so I will defend myself on that. So asking if it's, she's a reliable narrator, I think it makes sense. I think it is good to have her as a narrator in this because it is, in fact, her story, and she gets emotional, and she's real about the things that she went through during No Man's Land and her feelings towards Batman. I think that's really the first time you get to see that because you don't see that too much during No Man's Land, so I appreciated that.
Huntress drew her rebel blade.
Is Batman wrong for accusing Huntress, or is Huntress wrong for not answering the question? And in fact, she never answers the question, but she tells Nightwing right away she didn't do it. So that's what happens there in that first issue. So is Batman wrong for accusing Huntress, or do you think Huntress is wrong for not answering the question?
Does he ever accuse her?
Yeah.
Does he say that you killed this guy and I'm going to stop?
Well, it's more one of those implied things.
Yeah,
did you
was
kill
kind of
him?
accusing.
I mean, the fact that he's asking the question, right? If there were trust inherently built up in that relationship, he would already be on the defense, like, let's find out who did this. But he's asking her.
Oh, don't make me disagree with you, please. I don't want to.
Well, I think that's a distinct difference. He doesn't offer help that, hey, someone's trying to frame you. He says, did you kill him?
No, yeah, he definitely is asking her, and he definitely thinks that like it's not impossible or likely that she did. I think accusing her is like literally pointing his finger and says, you did it, you killed him, and I'm going to arrest you. He never says that, and he's suspicious of her, but I think he's a very kind of like Batman thing where he's like, just tell me this. But he also like leaves. He says, if I find out you did this, I'm going to take you down. But he leaves. He doesn't fight her. He doesn't fight her until like she's escaping the second murder victim.
I don't know. I'm looking at that same, like I have the book open right now, and he says, "Where were you tonight?" And then he like holds up there, one of these was buried, in his heart. And then when she's like, "I was in the shower," he's like, "Your hair is wet,"
which is like true.
What? Okay, but like, in the context of the conversation, he is saying like, yeah, I'm looking at every panel. She says, I didn't do it to him, but like she doesn't say it in her narration. And he says, you don't seem surprised. Like everything he's saying is like, not an interrogation, but like, it's very, very like challenging to her. Like, like your hair is wet. Where were you tonight? You don't seem surprised, like,
I mean, okay. Yeah, that is all true. And like, is that necessarily like something that like he shouldn't be doing? Really? They established throughout this entire miniseries that she has a history of like brutal violence, and I have a question about her later on that I honestly don't know. But like, this is kind of like the runaround we do with this relationship is that like, to what extent should he like not be investigating this?
There's investigating though, and like she makes a good point at one point where she says, the line she says is, if this was Nightwing, like if someone like showed up with like a Nightwing like battering like in his chest, like she never believed that Dick would do it. And at one point I was like, yeah, she's right. But then I thought for a second, but on the other hand too, like him and Dick have a different level of trust. So I kind of go back and forth on it. And I was thinking about this as I read it. I think that both of them mishandled this is going to sound like such a cop-out, but I think that there's a little bit of blame on like both sides in the way that both of them handled like the interaction in these scenes. I think that, Batman breaking into the, again, like she's like, at least Nightwing asked before he came in and stuff like that. I mean, because at this point they have been on the JLA together, and No Man's Land was a year-long story. And like one of the central plot points of that year-long story was like kind of like Huntress's redemption, and like Huntress finally getting that like stamp of approval of Batman at the end, like, you did good work, Huntress. So it's disappointing to me, and it was disappointing at the time when I read this in 2000, and it's disappointing to me now that like after all that and after all that character development, we're kind of like back to this like, were you the one that did this? And again, like she's been on the JLA, like would he do this to Plastic Man? Like, although granted, Plastic Man doesn't have that history of the violence. So I can see Batman's side of this, but I would also say that both of them mishandled the conversation.
I think that's a good point. And I think, is that what you were kind of going off with, Stella? Because I don't want to just agree with Josh and disagree with you, because I don't want to do that.
Well, I asked if you guys wanted to do this controversial story, so I mean, you better get used to disagreeing with me.
Well, I don't seek out to do it, but like, to me, it's like, okay, yeah, this is
I
like,
thought this would be more fun.
Batman and Huntress by numbers. But like, I didn't want to get into this whole, like, what in the world was he thinking, accusing her of murder? It's like, really? Is this really surprising? But I mean, I do take the point that like their relationship should be different after No Man's Land and after like those JLA stories. I will concede that like this isn't like 1996. A lot of stuff has happened between them, so it feels a little negligent of Greg Rucka to kind of like write it as this. I will say though, but when I was reading it, I didn't register a blip for me. But if you're bringing all that into the forefront, then I was going to say, okay, yeah, maybe he should finally at last give her a break. So
he came into that apartment with a bad attitude.
I mean, he was ready to go. And the fact that he, later on in whatever part it was, 4, I suppose, is telling her that he knows she didn't do it and is giving her leeway. I don't know when that sort of switch happened. Like, did another killing have to happen and then he realized it must not have been her? But it would almost be the opposite because she had fled. That seems suspect. So now all of a sudden he's on her side. So I think there's an inconsistency with his character in this particular story, and I think in the continuity of the universe as a whole.
I think that's probably owed to Nightwing and Robin believing her, and then like because 3 months has passed. I imagine they kind of wore him down.
Yeah, and then just kind of like when not to get, too controversial and allude to other things, but there's like moments where like, you could be in a situation with someone and like you're feeling very, very charged in a particular moment like Batman is. And then like after a blow up, like, someone shooting someone with an arrow, you kind of like when everyone gets a chance to calm down, he might have like looked at it from a different perspective. Like, okay, yeah, she did kind of like, save all those babies in No Man's Land and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
which they reference in this. Because
she says something like, I stopped the Joker from committing infesticide. And I was like, oh, man.
Infanticide.
Whatever, yeah.
He was going to destroy a bunch of cockroaches.
I couldn't let him do it. I value all life. Sarah Essen got shot in the face for a cockroach.
Okay, so I guess we disagree about that particular thing, which, it's going to happen. If we could move on to part 2, and of course we can go back and everything, but just these questions that I have. So I did want to talk about the Huntress and Nightwing conversation that they have in part 2 in the apartment. And she right away confesses she did not do it. Before you ask, I didn't do it, and he didn't think she did. But then the accusation, I mean, she gets kind of hot, would that be anything like the help I got during No Man's Land when he wants to offer help to her? Mm-hmm. And she goes on and talks about Pettit and Joker and Quinn. When Batman manipulated me, is that the kind of help you mean? And he said that's not fair, and they get really, really close and angry. Maybe there's a potential romantic moment right there with that tension. And then he says he's not my boss, and it's silent, and he ends up leaving.
Potential romantic moment. Like, after their fight, he's like, this dinner smells good. You dining alone? And she's like, get the out of my apartment.
Well, I mean, there's that one panel. I mean, they're very close. I mean, often, it's a trope, I suppose, but, you see people get really heated and in an argument, and all of a sudden then it, like, devolves into sex. So I feel like that one panel where their heads are close in the red background, there's that instant where I think they remember that chemistry that they may have had, but they also know that's wrong because that's been brought up.
He invites himself to stay for dinner.
Are you disagreeing with me? I can't tell what that point is.
Oh, I'm agreeing with you, and I'm adding on that.
Okay.
He like invites himself to dinner. It's like really inappropriate.
Yeah. Well, I know she thinks it was a mistake, and he had in his own title said that it was a mistake to get together too, and he's with Barbara kind of at this point, so it's just interesting. But what are your thoughts just on that whole conversation, her really letting go and letting loose with all of the stuff that happened during No Man's Land?
I think that in this story, Dick clearly cares for Helena and kind of wants to see her okay. And I think he may still have some residual feelings for her, but it's not really fully fleshed out. Like, he's not like, oh, I'm in love with her, but he's just like, I can't help but like worry about her in this story. I don't think Helena really respects Nightwing or ever has. And I think that, like, she tolerates him more than Batman. I think she, like, tolerates Robin the best. Like, she knows she can actually talk back to Nightwing in a way where, that actually lands some punches. And so when he kind of snaps back, like, he doesn't want to get it too much into her. And near the end, when he's like, "Oh, you're dying alone," he's just trying to be, like, kind of like comforting to her and, like, maybe a little flirty. And she's like, that's a go nowhere zone. So I think it's well written. I think there's a number of emotions kind of coming in and out of the scene. And I think that, like, I know in Dixon's Nightwing title, he's very much kind of like face palming, like, I hooked up with Huntress once. I don't want to think about it. Like,
it depends on who's writing. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because Devin Grayson wrote the miniseries, and Doug Dixon doesn't, go too much to it. But, like, in this one, I think he's a little bit more positive in his opinion of her. And I think in Nightwing, she's a lot more flirty to him. I think she teases him more. Where in this one, because she's dealing with, like, her own, like, name on the line, she's like, whatever, just, but you're in my way, kind of thing.
She was like the Black Cat in the Nightwing title. She's like, "Hello, lover," and, like, kissing him in, like, front of Barbara.
Yeah, that kind of crap. Like I think in this one, like he wants to let her know that he cares for her. He wants to help, and she's like, "That's not even entering my mind right now."
I like the conversation, even though, like, I think both parties, like, make mistakes during it, kind of like the Batman one, because that is good writing, where if you could, like, write a conversation where there's no good guy and bad guy, and, like, everyone's kind of, like, flawed and it's, like, emotionally charged, it's interesting. And it's been a while since I've read these books kind of, like, as they were coming out, so, like, Stella might have a different perspective because she's covering it for BTO, but, like, you have to look at this as, like, what's Dick's relationship with Babs right now, because they, like, kiss at the end of No Man's Land, but then he kisses Helena, and then, like, it's like, okay, are they a couple or not? And, like, the first few months after No Man's Land, which is, like, around the time when this is, it really goes back and forth, because, like, Babs is still kind of, like, seeing Ted court-ish, and then Dick is, like, kissing Clancy, but then he's also, like, with Barbara, so, like, I guess it's like him and Barbara are just, they're together, but they're not, like, full-on, like, exclusive yet. They're still exploring options. So Dick's not necessarily, like, cheating on Barbara when he, like, invites himself to stay at the Helenas, but, like, I really thought that moment was inappropriate. He's like, dinner smells good. And he looks at you dining alone, like, and yeah, she says, "See yourself out," which she has every right to say after he, like, comes in, like, the way that he did, even though he was more appropriate than Batman did. And I like Huntress unloading on him for No Man's Land because, ultimately, and to bring up another old argument, I do think that there was instances in No Man's Land where Huntress was in the wrong, but I would also say that, like, she was manipulated by the Batman family, and they never really had, like, a post-mortem on that. And she's like, "Yeah, you guys, like, left me to deal with Pettit and stuff." And I'm, like, distinctly remembering, like, those scenes where, like, Pettit's, like, ready to, like, kill everyone in his camp, and, like, Robin and Batman are, like, looking in binoculars like, "Oh man, Huntress is sure in trouble." "Oh, well, Robin." He's like, "Oh well, Robin, radio me if anyone dies." Like,
well, Nightwing was also in those stories where they were interacting with Huntress, like Batman, Nightwing, and Huntress. He kind of come off as, like, Batman's lapdog, like, more than he ever really should. Like he's kind of like the overt bad guy. And this happens in this one, like the overt good guy to Batman's bad cop. He's like, "Huntress, listen, he just wants to help," and Batman just like grabs her by the wrist and stuff.
Which is probably why he says he's not my boss. I think there's a bit of a defensiveness in that.
Yeah.
I like this. I like this discussion. I like seeing Helena like this. She's tried to ingratiate herself so much with this Batman family. And, at times it might fit, but a lot of times it just doesn't. And so I appreciate a lot of it that she's going to figure this out on her own. And she's on her own and she's fine with that. And she doesn't want this outside pressure. And it just reminds her of that bad stuff in No Man's Land. And yes, she may have made mistakes in No Man's Land, but I like her throwing that all out there of, like, this is all that stuff that happened to me. So you can also see, I think, the damage that No Man's Land has wrought on her, because, of course, we focus on other people, like what happened to Barbara or Cassandra or Batman, but, it really took a psychological toll. So you do have to have some empathy and compassion, I think, for Huntress in what she went through, even if she did make mistakes. So I do appreciate that. But it's an interesting arc of the conversation, how it gets really high and then it drops down, and then she's like, you just need to get out of there. So I'm glad there wasn't like a weak moment of sex or something like that.
Oh my God.
Greg Rucka's a better writer than that.
Yes, well, who knows?
He's definitely thirsty for her in this series, because he's like, at one point he's like to Batman, I think I should go over there. Like go away, Dick.
That is true. Do you think later on Nightwing overreacts to Batman getting shot?
Big time. And that's not, like, you can't hit a girl exactly, but like, look at like the transition. He's like, we just want to help. And like, he's not being violent to her at all. And then like when he sees Batman's like in mortal danger, he snaps. And I don't know if I've ever seen Dick Grayson react that way to like Batman being hurt. Like, I was kind of like, gosh, really? I was kind of like trying to put in my head, like, okay, I guess, in that instance, he thought that Huntress, there may be a chance that like she's as bad as people say she is, and he feels foolish or whatever. I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around that. That's a possibility, I think. But that was a lot. It was a little weird seeing like Dick be that violent when Batman said stop her. He can like fight her, but like he went kind of overboard, and like it's not the fact that like you can't punch Huntress because they've fought before. It's just that like he seemed a lot more vicious than I've seen Dick usually get in that instance. So that was a little weird.
The panel where it says no, let me go. Like the panel where it says no, his face, he's like, "Grr," and like her hand is like up, like stop, please, and like her face is bloodied. It's a very uncomfortable panel.
She has a battering stuck in her wrist.
Yeah, it's just it escalated so quickly, and it's clear that how much of an accident it was. I mean, even her face shows instant remorse, whereas you might expect Huntress to be like, "Well, you deserved it," but it wasn't there. And then just that Nightwing goes after, I thought, "Oh my gosh, what's happening here?"
You can even tell that like when she lands, it went off by accident. And actually, I actually really liked how Nightwing dodged. I thought that was kind of like cool, kind of decoration acrobatics, but like it was clearly an accident. And even Batman's like, "I didn't see this coming."
In fairness, I'm looking at the fight. Like she shoots an arrow at him first, and he like dodges it. But like, had he not dodged it, like it would have hit him. Like it eventually did. So like,
she says, "Just distract him." I think she knew that like he could dodge that one.
Yeah. But anyway, like, so he throws his batterings at her, and that makes her fall to the ground, and then it shoots him. So technically, it's Batman's fault. But
if we're point scoring here, then sure, why not?
Well, because like he knocks her over, and by him knocking her over, that's how the arrow goes into him.
Mm-hmm. And he says later on, like I knew it was an accident.
He better have. Like anyone that was on that roof should have known it was an accident. Especially that being said, that conversation, I talk about mishandled conversations in this arc. Like that was a really mishandled conversation on their end. Like they were very, very much like, okay, like you're coming with me. And at that point, like, even if you think she did it, he has shown more restraint, like dealing with like people like Catwoman. He'd be like, Selena, like when he thought that Selena...
I wouldn't say that. I would not say that.
Oh, I think so.
Still go to the golden age. Like, I think of modern age.
I don't even have to go to the golden age. I'll go to Tom King. Like, wow, Selena, like you really like when Selena took the blame for like those Holly Robinson murders, it's like, wow, Selena, you murdered hundreds of people. I guess I got to turn you in, but first.
Okay, wow, interesting. Several characters comment on Huntress's sanity, so I realize this could be opening a can of worms. But do you think that she is sane?
I mean, this is what I'm always like referring back to. It's like it's not just Batman being mean. It's like this is like been the Bat family status quo all throughout the decade of the 90s, that Huntress is a potentially unstable vigilante who doesn't abide by the set of ethics that everyone else does. And Oracle's right there with them. Like Oracle has to be kind of talked by Dick and Tim. Maybe she didn't do it. So I'm always like, that's why I'm always kind of perplexed as to why this sort of like, why there's in this conversation, why is it that Huntress is like, being like underestimated in a way that's unfair? Because that was in terms of like, I guess like the fan conversation. Do I think she's sane? I mean, as much as a vigilante is in DC Comics, I mean, I don't think that she's never come across as particularly like ruthless or what have you, but she is somebody who was raised in a violent world separate from the others, where you understand why she is the way she is. So I don't think she's insane, But I do see and understand and recognize that she's I would say she's probably darker of a character than Batman is. And I think that like that carries throughout her means, stabbing people and I mean, I want to ask a question later on, but I don't know if this is not the right time in terms of like her past. It's like, what exactly her like lethal skills have taken her to.
I think she's sane as like Tim Drake, Dick Grayson, and like Barbara Gordon are. Like, she's more violent than them, but I don't think that violence equals insanity. It just equals like morality. Like, she seems to have a grip on sanity, I would think. I mean, and I'm not the best person to diagnose insanity or not. And in terms of people commenting on her sanity, I know Stella said it's like a hot button issue, but I guess if we're going there, it's almost like a comment on like, feminism and stuff where like, like if a man does this, like it's not, he's like, a hardcore person, but if a woman does it, like she's unhinged and she's out of control. Trying to figure out how to say this without bringing like a very, very charged name in here, but there's certain women in our like society who are powerful women who people accuse of being power hungry, and people just repeat over and over again, oh, this woman just wants power, they just want power, and it's like repeated so many times that it's accepted as a fact. But then like if you ask, well, can you look at some quotes of hers where she says she wants power, and like there's no quotes like that. In fact, like she's turned down like chances to have more power, but it's one of those things that if it's repeated enough, it just becomes about her. And I had that epiphany about Huntress earlier, where it's like, it's almost like that with her, where like everyone just repeats Huntress is reckless so many times that it just becomes a fact. What is she doing that's like different from what Batman's doing, aside from like she uses arrows and he uses batarangs? Like, she's extreme, she's like violent, but like I guess Batman's violent too, but like we're told that Huntress is more violent, but we're not like.
Well, I mean, we've seen some instances of that, and I think there have been inconsistencies because there will be like Legends of the Dark Knight stories where Batman's pretty violent, but like there will be like Chuck Dixon stories where like he's never like maims anybody. The difference is that like there's a Birds of Prey story where Huntress like let a guy burn to death while Oracle was screaming for her not to do that. Like I don't know why no one brings that up.
You do have a point there, but yeah, a lot of times it's just like we're told Huntress is like reckless, and we're told it enough times that it's like a stated fact without it like being shown too many times.
We saw it in like Robin 3, Cry the Huntress, where like
I haven't read that in years.
We saw it in that spoiler story where Huntress was there. Like,
well, then that's another thing too. Like Arthur Brown's like, she's gonna kill your old man. It's like, is she though? Like, what did she do in that spoiler story again? Like, that was so bad. Like, I'm trying to remember it, and it could be something really obvious. It's like, oh yeah, never mind. But like,
yeah, I think that this is a good conversation to have. Like, I do think in terms of consistency, she can't be written like Batman, and people are like, well, she's a woman, so like that's a no-go zone. Like, she's crazy. I think that's absolutely true. At the same time, there have been instances where we've seen her actuate the fears of all of the other characters. Like she has. I don't know if she's actually killed anybody, and at this point I got to refer back to the original Joe Staton series from like 1989, which was much darker. And I know that she's let people die, which the Bat family don't like doing. So like I think it's if you're going to say that like she's no different than any of them, that's not true. But I would agree.
But the differences are like so small and minor.
I mean, I think it depends on the circumstance. I think that like letting somebody die is a big enough deal where like. That's we've seen people get kicked out.
And Batman's on like the JLA with like people that have done like the same or worse.
Such as
Oliver Queen.
Oliver was he? I guess that was later on.
Yeah, he's like tortured people with his arrows.
Well, I think honestly Oliver's dead at this point.
I mean, it did
and that was later on in his career when he wasn't.
I mean, and to open a big can of worms, which like we're not going to really get into, but I have time. But just to like as an example to answer your question, like, did Superman not like take a bunch of Phantom Zone criminals in a room and execute them?
Well, you read that story where like he tells Bruce that after Jason Todd dies, and Bruce like kicks him out of the house. Like, I mean, that was later addressed,
yeah,
but
he doesn't say I'm bringing you in, and then like get like Nightwing to like Nightwing like goes to Clark's house. Like, anyone else having dinner?
The Fortress of Solitude.
And it's funny because I was looking at TV tropes, and I sent this image to Dawn earlier. Like, I thought this was a really funny observation about the Huntress, which actually it kind of goes against the point that I was making, but it was like a funny quote. TV tropes. I'm going to read this quote. It says, "In Arrow, Helena Bertinelli is a reoccurring villain. Of course, this required only small changes to her basic character." And I was like, "Oh, shots fired."
To kind of put a fine point on it, I think it's both things. I think that you kind of wonder why they had this character in the beginning, because she's ultimately a good guy. She's a bit more violent, but she has her. She's a very interesting character, and she runs up against the Bat family. I think that to really make it easier to understand why Batman and the others don't accept her would be to have her be like a consistent killer. At the same time, though, it does annoy me when people act like she's like an innocent newborn baby. Like, oh no, she's never done anything. Like, we've never seen, like, yes, we have. But I will agree that at the same time it's inconsistent, and I think that like the sexism implicit in a woman doing the things that a man does, not being accepted, is 100% in play throughout her history. And I really wish Caroline Coca was here to set us all straight, but we'll have to do our best without her.
Jason Todd is actually a good example.
I would say that she's sane as well. I think obviously she has a similar origin, if you think about it, with Bruce Wayne, that she was witness to her family getting murdered.
Oh, yeah.
And she ends up, the trauma, she just goes a different path than he goes, right? So it may have been a bit more violent than he went. I will say, at least on her behalf, that at least in her side life, she's a teacher and she's loving on those kids, whereas he's not doing much.
Wait, what? She's doing what to the kids?
Loving on those kids. Loving the kids.
Okay, yeah. That is a kind of funny panel where they clearly have a crush on her because she's like this, like...
Yeah, I know, yeah, sure. Versus, him being a billionaire playboy. So
I've got it bad, got it bad.
Have to.
Okay, Stella, because this is your anniversary show, what is your opinion of the Huntress precisely? How does the Huntress compare to Batgirl?
Well, I would say that they're quite different. If I were to, how does it compare? It's like an apple and an orangutan. They both are vigilantes and they both strive for justice. I think to a certain extent they also both, so I'm doing the comparisons of my Venn diagram, they both are looking for acceptance to a certain extent, but I think they also both don't need it and they can stand on their own. Where they split is, of course, their origin story. There's no tragic past with Barbara. I think she overall has a more positive attitude. I think she looks for the hope in others, and she is similar to Batman in wanting to redeem characters, and I think she looks for those positive aspects in people. But with Huntress, I think it's people aren't as redeemable, and so she's willing to potentially put them down, though I've not witnessed it, except in Birds of Prey. I will agree that has in fact happened.
Yeah, it did. What do you think about Oracle generally not liking her? Do you think that
Yeah, so this is, it certainly was one of my questions. Yes, because she has that conversation with Nightwing where she's upset. I think there is some jealousy there as well. I'm sure she knows of their romantic past. So I think there's jealousy there. But also it's interesting how she is recapping Helena's tragic past. But the way that it's written, the tone, how I read it, is it's almost lacking compassion and it's almost just stating facts, quite mechanical. And if there were any time for Barbara to soften, that would be the moment. She doesn't necessarily have to like her, but to at least show empathy and be with her at that moment. So I was quite surprised with Barbara not doing that. I think that was a character misstep, or, I could just be like, shame on you, Barbara. That's not the way we handle things in empathy world. Do I think that she has the right to not like her? I think there are several reasons why she doesn't like her. She doesn't like her methods. I do think she thinks she's a bit violent for other people's taste, but I'm trying to think of what Barbara thought of Jason Todd when he was going over the edge, that kind of thing.
She wasn't really there
so
for
you
that.
Have to.
Yeah,
She was, so there's not much to say about that. I think, again, there's jealousy. I think with the Dick thing, it really hurt. You can't put it past her, the fact that Huntress was in her Batgirl costume. I think that was a huge misstep on her and Batman's apart. And so that's like something that I think will take a while to get over. But, there might be a bit of a shade of Batman in Barbara. I don't know if this is like a mischaracterization or it makes sense that that's happened and that maybe she doesn't give Huntress as much a benefit of doubt. And that's just the way the writers went with it, because right off the bat, she doesn't trust Huntress. The first time they meet in, Black Canary is like, who are you talking to? Oh, Huntress, don't talk to her. So, right off the bat. So, where does that come? I don't necessarily know. It might have been some brainwashing. I'll say brainwashing of Batman. But so I kind of see why she doesn't like her. But, I'm looking forward to seeing them build a relationship as I continue in Birds of Prey and seeing her soften. And again, I will say that I think she should have shown some empathy as she's just stating these facts very dryly. All these people died. I thought, yikes, show some empathy.
Do you know who introduced Helena and Dick to each other?
What, Barbara?
Yeah, it was technically Barbara. There's like an early 90s like Birds of Prey issue. I guess it's I'm trying or not.
Wait. Early 90s Birds of Prey.
No. I meant to say
one of the one shots that I've covered.
Yeah, no. This is before that. It wasn't Birds of Prey. It was Black Canary's solo title. I called it Birds of Prey because like the members of the Birds of Prey were in there like separately. I don't remember the exact plot details, but like I think like Black Canary's like kidnapped or something's going on, and like Huntress is like being sent to get Huntress is like on a mission together, and she's like, well, I'm like kind of the outcast of the Bat family, so like I want the other Bat family outcast to like help me. So like she requests Oracle to put her in touch, and this is like back when Oracle was just like a computer screen, like, and you see Babs like I'm trying to remember how Huntress even got in touch with Oracle, but like she requested her to put her in touch with Nightwing, and she's like, oh, he recently left the Titans, because this was during that whole like Starfire wedding fiasco where like there was that coup, it's a coup, quid pro quo, where Nightwing was like ousted from the Titans by Arsenal. So like Nightwing like right, in fact there's even like a funny part where like Helena and Dick are like undercover somewhere, and like she's like, are you married? And Dick's like, it's very complicated. But yeah, Barbara was the one that introduced them.
Well, okay, let's move on to Tim. Small role, and he's also I might have to bleep this out, but a bit of a blocker.
How you figure?
Because of I was thinking about this when the recap was going on. Isn't there one of those fan fiction stories that we have all read that was also probably TVMA or whatever they're rated R?
Where's this going?
And it was Batgirl and Nightwing. And doesn't Tim pop in, or is it Batman?
No, that was Batman, but Tim did block them during Cataclysm.
Yeah, it's not surprising. I guess that's his role. But what do you think about his overall role in this particular story? The fact that he is trying to help Helena and it goes to Oracle and gets her to do some digging with him. What do you think about how he plays?
It's been established for all throughout comics in the last 10 years that like Huntress is on better terms between Robin and Nightwing than she is with Oracle and Batman. And I like the fact that Greg Rucka is bringing that in. She's wanted for murder. Batman's like, I'm going to get you. And Oracle's like, she did it. And Nightwing and Tim are giving her the benefit of the doubt. Because Tim was alone in Nightfall because Jean-Paul went crazy. And so he was fighting crime with Helena. He fought crime with her early in his career in Robin 3, Cry of the Huntress. So, I mean, he's also kind of wary of her. But like he also, at the same time, he kind of knows that she has a good heart. So like he feels almost insecure and like kind of like trusting her as much as he does. And I love when we first see him in the clock tower, Oracle's clock tower. He's like, thanks for letting me stop by. And she's like, anytime, Tim. You're always welcome. So how's school? Because he's like, after No Man's Land, his father was like, that's it. You're going to boarding school. So she's asking about that. So that's. We're seeing a lot more development between him and Oracle than I was anticipating. I like.
And once he says Huntress, her face turns like, get out.
Salty looking face, but like, but I like the fact that like, he's going to her because he doesn't need to talk to Dick about it, but he doesn't think he can probably talk to Batman about it. So, I think he's used well. I mean, Robin shouldn't be all over this book, but I thought he was used appropriately, and I like the fact that Rucka knew about Huntress's various relationships in the Batman family to utilize them to their maximum potential.
And I like Tim and Barbara kind of being the detectives together because that's their role. I'm wondering because like she calls him Tim and she references Bramwood. I'm like, was this before or after like he found out that she knew his identity, or like is this a continuity mistake? Because at some point during the Brentwood saga, and I don't think it was like this soon, there's like an issue like Batman, like Robin and Alfred are like on their way like back to Brentwood from like a plane or something. And he's like being cagey with Oracle, like, you know, like, oh, yes, this random Brentwood student is very important to me. She's like, all right, I'll talk to you later, Tim. And she like hangs up. And Robin's like, oh, my God, Alfred, she knows my name. She knows my secret identity. And Alfred's like, well, duh, sir.
Duh, sir. Is he Jeffrey from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
I mean, it's if you listen to Batgirl the Oracle, you should know that like I'm paraphrasing and that you can't trust like one word that I said, but like
you can't trust that narrator, right, Donovan?
That's right.
I'm the unreliable narrator. Yeah.
My ex indeed.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm like, I feel like she did like the whole like Barbara knows who Tim is and Tim knows that she knows who he is. Like, did not come till later, but I don't have the issues in front of me. For all I know, this could have been the same month as that. In fact, because this is issue 3, this would have been like towards the end of that first year of Brentwood. So, you know, maybe. And you could always say if this took place after. There's no like clear continuity spot. But yeah, I like their little relationship here. And as for, Robin the blocker, because he blocked Helena here and he blocked Dick and Babs in Cataclysm. So I don't know. Lock your doors if Tim's around.
Okay. I like Tim. You know, Tim's not my favorite Robin. Everyone knows that, I think, that has been listening to this. But I will say that he's one of those people, and I had someone in my life in college that this person seems to be able to be friends with everybody. And I think that's Tim. I mean, you know, I see Tim and Helena as they were teaming up during Cataclysm, I believe. And was it Contagion?
Oh, they've seen it before.
Yeah. And then Tim would team up with Jean-Paul, you know, so he is that one. And I think he gives her the benefit of the doubt, which I think she needs, certainly, you know, she needs someone on her side. And so Tim is there. And I like that Tim is also unafraid to go to Oracle because he might know that she's a bit of a sourpuss over Huntress and say, hey, we need to do this. And he might have been able to assuage some of her fears as well, and or doubts as to Huntress's innocence. So I do like Tim. I think it's a small role, but it's a crucial role, and I'm glad that he is there because I think Huntress does need someone in her, in her corner. That's what it is. Well, let's talk about the cabin business. I did actually have a question, but it was answered later on because as I was reading, I was thinking to myself, my gosh, she's been away for so long. Did you even hire a sub? Did she call in from work? And then later on, she comes back to her apartment and she gets that notification that she's been fired because of all of her absences from work. I was like, thank you for there being some realism in there. Tom and I have talked about Huntress for sometimes as well, especially bruises, like coming into work the next day with bruises. Who knows? But so this is really interesting because we have a connection. We have a pretty intimate connection between Helena and Barbara now in The Man of Richard Dragon.
You mean
so what do you think about Richard Dragon? Yeah.
Okay.
He trained her as Oracle.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Wow, he just tried. Ladies and gentlemen, that is an example of a mansplaining babsplainer right there. Because he just tried to make it seem like I didn't know what I was talking about, and yet I do. So thank you on my 10th anniversary for trying to throw some shade on me. Okay.
I had a bunch of people on my Facebook the other day say, you shouldn't say the word mansplaining. It's very, very mean, and it's against all men. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry.
If the shoe fits, man, if the shoe fits. But anyways, what is your thought about Richard Dragon popping up in this book and his role and the training sequences? Yeah, just talk about Richard Dragon.
You know what? To be honest, I never thought about, like, oh, he also trained Barbara when she was...
you're not trying to explain it now? What just happened? Is that what you're trying to do?
I don't have to talk. He can just go to Josh.
Yeah, I didn't care for it. I didn't hate it, but I was like, okay, like this is kind of superfluous to like the rest of the story for me. And like, I kind of like, you know, like when you're reading something and you're like really engaged with it. And then other times when you're reading and you're just like reading to get to like the next page, like that was a reading to get to the next page part for me.
What I connected Richard Dragon was the Question series, which I read this year, by Denny O'Neil and Dennis Cowan, because Vic Sage, the Question, when he was like beaten to death by Lady Shiva, she sent him to Richard Dragon to kind of basically do the same thing, like kind of get his life together and kind of, center himself. So when I was seeing this, it's like, oh, this is playing out the same way, where Question is sending her to him, and he's basically somebody who can help people, kind of calm, kind of find themselves, kind of, get balanced in their soul. I saw that because there's a lot of Question here, and I kind of saw that as sort of like, an echo of what had come before. But yeah, it does, especially for this show, it does make a better relation that the same thing happened to Barbara, however many years ago.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It reminds me also in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, always goes to upstate New York at the farm and have a little rest and relaxation, that. But of all the, people who really needs to be out, I think, and center herself and maybe away from, the maybe violence, but just like get with herself, I think was Huntress, and for her to really heal spiritually as well as physically. I enjoyed it. His character design was a little weird. I kind of didn't want him to be a balding man, but that's just me personally. But I liked that, Vic, Question just drops her off, and here we go. It was kind of like a weird circumstance, but I enjoyed it.
Because you said that, I'm now imagining Helena at like Richard Dragon's little retreat, and she lights a fire, and then like a Jim Henson version of Splinter, like my sons. I'm sorry. This is the wrong farm. I'm looking for 4 baby turtles.
I always forget that happened. Oh dear.
Very true. What is it about Vic Sage that makes Helena trust him and tell her story? And you can also talk about the shipping. Did you like that there was shipping between the two?
I can provide some backstory, but I don't want to mansplain at all. So.
Well, now you may, because I don't have expertise in that
and because she asked you. The difference between mansplaining is like if someone asks you, then it's not mansplaining.
Cool. This is what's great about the show. The teacher teaches the students. Yeah, no, like I said, I read the Question series, and he was kind of like somewhat similar. I mean, he wasn't like as like I don't know if I would say he's just like Helena in like kind of her personality, but he was somebody who kind of like, thought with his fists, and he wasn't very intelligent, and that basically got him killed. And when he trained with Richard Dragon and met Lady Shiva, he became a lot more calm and cool-headed and philosophical. Kind of the version we see here now. He's not as aggressive or frightening as he's kind of started out, and he's much more zen about everything, which kind of makes him a lot more of an interesting character. And he says, I know this trajectory. I ran myself, not the same course, but similar. He references dying. Having read that, I thought, this. I get this because I can see how he sees himself in her. The shipping, I remember this sort of relationship like when I first read this way back when, and of course they did this a big time in Justice League Unlimited.
Justice League,
yeah, which apparently was a coincidence. I was texting our friend Alex Jaff, and I asked him because he's a big Question fan. I asked him if he had any thoughts on this, and he said that when Gail Simone wrote that episode, she had no idea that they had like hooked up in this miniseries. It was like kismet.
Oh, interesting, because I did know that they had some sort of like relationship in this, and that's the only way you connect Question and the Hunter. So that's funny that that's just a cosmic coincidence. But because he's definitely a few years older than her. Like she's said to be like 23 in this, and he's not. So like there was a little bit of like, gosh, this is reminding me of our last Kino episode about May December romances. But like I've taught myself out of caring about that. So I thought it was interesting, and it was somewhat tragic how their opposite natures kind of prevented them from like kind of like staying together and being happy. So I thought it was an interesting relationship that did not make sense.
Yeah, I don't really have much thoughts on it. It was a romance. I mean, I'm not going to do a shipper spotlight on it anytime soon, but Helena deserves some love from a faceless man. The Question, he's a hardworking vigilante. So it's nice that he gets a little nookie now and again.
I enjoyed it. I'm glad it was a bit of a slow burn, like kind of building up to it. Again, the film noir feel almost felt like the Private Dick and the femme fatale, something like that, double indemnity maybe. So I enjoyed it, and it probably was doomed, especially, the end page. I mean, that really dooms it to the end. But I just found it really interesting that, he knocks her out. First she almost runs over him and he goes off into the woods like a creeper, and then he knocks her out and all this stuff. And then she opens up to him, and she doesn't open up to many people. And so she always wears this figurative mask, and so I wondered what it was about him. And I think there are similarities between the two of them, and I think he's gone to that edge, and he's worried for her that she doesn't go to that edge and can't find her way back. And so I think he is someone that struggles with his inner demons, whatever they may be. And so I think she also, because he has no affiliation with the Batman family, I think that's also maybe a safer spot. Like, there's not going to be as much judgment here necessarily, and so I can really tell my story. But just to have someone also ask questions, I think, is huge, because asking questions implies that you care about someone and their story. And so I think the fact that he keeps prompting her, throughout that entire bus trip, when she falls asleep, she wakes up, he asks her questions, they're waiting for the bus, asking questions. I think that's a really huge and powerful moment as well, and that's why she tells her story. So I think it's really well written in that.
You might even say that he's a question we don't have an answer.
Indeed. Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So then we get to, I think, what was this, issue 4 maybe, or 5? Issue 5, I think. Batman and Huntress talk again. And so what are your thoughts on this second, I can call it a confrontation between Batman and Huntress, but it's certainly, the tone is completely different, that he's giving her the benefit of the doubt. He says, you're being framed. I'm going to give you space. Just don't do this. What are your thoughts on this 180 potentially, or a 90 maybe, from Batman?
I want to hear what you think.
Oh, me? This is the Batman that I like. I mean, you accuse me of not liking Batman, and I don't like bat-jerk Batman, but, when I see Batman like this, who cares for the members of his family, whether they're completely in line with his ideals or not, that's the Batman I like. So the fact, he should have been like this from the very beginning, in my opinion. I think he should have realized that it wasn't her, especially when she said, I didn't do it, and to give her that space, but to also give her a firm line, like, this is, do not break this rule, right? And so I really appreciated that. I thought it was honest. There weren't any screaming or yelling. I think he gives her trust in that moment. So I thought that this was a great character moment, and I enjoyed it.
I liked it. It's hard for me to look at it in a vacuum, though, because I can't look at this and think about it without thinking about how how the comic ends, how issue 6 ends.
All right.
So I think I'm going to save more of my thoughts on that for when we talk about the end of issue 6. But otherwise, like, Batman's conduct in this is good. Like, this should have been the conversation that they had in issue 1. Like, he's like, hey, someone like died and it's pointing to you. Like, do you want my help on this? Otherwise, like, all right, handle it. But like, just don't do anything bad.
I mean, well, if you can take the first conversation in consideration, this is much more of a reconciliation. They kind of a start over. I think the dialogue is really good, where she says, I didn't mean to shoot you. It was an accident. He says, I know. And she says, I don't want to
look at his face, too, when he says, I know.
Yeah, it's very conciliatory. And she puts her face in her hands, and she says, I don't want to fight with you anymore. I didn't kill Claudio and the reporter. And if you can't believe me, I don't know what to do to convince you. And he's like, you don't have to. I'm trying very hard to trust you. You don't make it easy, but neither do I. And she's like, no, you don't. She's like, let's try this again. And he says, don't mess with the police and we'll be good. And like, and then he turns the question, like, what are you doing here? Still looking for answers. It's not the answers that matter. It's the questions. And I like that. Like,
the question is, how long will it take before Robin knocks on this door, and how far can I get?
I mean, like, I kind of see, and maybe it's because of how it's drawn. I kind of see like the new Batman Adventures Batman in this. Well, for whatever that matters. But like, I mean, if I take like, some recent interactions out of context or out of my mind, I didn't necessarily mind the last conversation they had, but with that in mind, with this, I like the fact that, like, it's not a one track, line. There is development between here that's shown, and and trust being shown. So I too like it.
Okay, we're getting close to the end here. I will say there was a funny Vic moment where he says that he'll go see if the voyeur is still out there, watching, observing her, and then the next scene is like he pops up right behind him. So there are some funny moments here, even though it is a pretty serious tale. And Tim popping up, there are some funny moments. So then, yeah, let's get to the end here.
Did you not want to talk about her flashback or her origin story?
Oh, we certainly can.
I mean, it's up to you. I'm not going to force it.
No, you can bring it up. What would you like to talk about, just in general?
I mean, all of issue 4 is her living with her cousin and not knowing the family business, then being trained. Her cousin and her uncle were assassins and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting, because they bring up Robin and Oracle talk about the fact that she lost her family the same age that Bruce lost his parents, but her whole bloodline was eradicated and she lived in this world of violence. Yeah. And she trained young like him, although she's much younger. Then she saw Batman when she was young. It's interesting. I think the only thing I want to bring up is the fact that, again, Josh, have you read her Huntress series from the late 80s, early 90s?
Oh, yeah. This I'm not a lot of it, but I've read enough. Yeah, this is a total retcon because
yeah, this is a retcon that because when they reestablish the character Huntress as not being Helena Wayne, Catwoman, Batwoman's daughter, she was college age when her family died, and here Rucka is straight up redoing the origin where she's a kid, which I think I've always been more familiar with, so I don't care. That was a much darker series that implied that she was molested as a child by other gangsters and stuff, and I feel that she would have killed people in that series. I just don't know, but this one, the story is definitely reestablishing who Helena Bertinelli is as a character. I think it does a good job by making her likable and sympathetic, while still showing her this is how she became violent. And I think it's interesting seeing that she trained since she was 11. So she's not some rookie who kind of goes out and shoots people with crossbows. She is somebody who knows martial arts and stuff. And I was thinking, gosh, I must have forgotten about this because this is all kind of pretty cool. And I want to know what you thought about learning her origin in this way.
Narratively, it makes more sense for her to be a child when it happens. Narratively, it works better that way than her being a young adult. That being said, it's kind of tired that every single superhero, it's because of something that happened in their childhood. Batman and Helena were, both 8. Even when they tell Batwoman's origin, Kate Kane was a little girl when she was kidnapped by terrorists with her twin sister.
Also, it's she's always an orphan or something.
Yeah, as opposed to the Golden Age where she was a flight attendant who hit her head. Take that, Batman Returns. So yeah, it's always the thing that happened to you in your childhood, which again, it makes for a more interesting story, but it's a cliche when it's every single character. So I don't know what I prefer. I do love one of my favorite openings of the Batman Adventures comic book is I think it was when it was the New Adventures of Batman and Robin comic, that was in the animated series continuity. They did an issue that dealt with the origin of the Huntress, and the opening page is you see Helena Bertinelli as a young adult, and she's hiding under the table, and she's drawn the Bruce Timm style, and everyone is dead around her, and she's crying. She's what just happened?
Before she showed up in Justice League.
Yeah. This was the Fox Kids era, and yeah. In fact, I remember she becomes Huntress in that story, and I remember thinking, oh wow, I only ever knew of it happening when she was a kid. So I'm wondering if the kid retcon came before, or if it's just something that I always assumed happened to her as a kid, and then later on I found out that it wasn't. I don't know.
I personally liked this. I thought it fit with the whole blood for blood theme that we were talking about, and family and Italian mafia, and given that space to really delve into it, because it was 6 issues, you could take that whole issue out and have it narrated by her. I haven't read that old miniseries, so I can't really say, but I'll just say that it felt like we fully fleshed her character out. We got to see her grow. There weren't, sort of Jesus Christ leaps, right, where you have small child, 33, 27-year-old man. So that sort of thing I very much enjoyed. And I feel like as a reader, you are, unless you're stone cold hearted, you should be forced to feel that empathy and compassion for her to see what she went through, and also potentially respect her more as a character and as a fighter, as a vigilante, right? Okay. Anything else before we talk about the ending?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Okay. So, of course, Josh alluded to what happens there, but she basically lets a murder happen. Vic pops up as question and says there's still time, and she says blood cries for blood, Vic, which was, of course, a theme for everything. Santos killed his sister. He asks, where does it end? When is it enough? Well, the gun goes off, and she says, now it's enough. And, of course, then she got rid of her uncle as well. And then he says, damn you. And it's interesting that she says it happened a long time ago. And a really big scene, for me in particular, is just that she takes off also that crucifix that she always wears around her neck as Huntress and drops it in there. So there's a lot of stuff going on in that particular thing. So just, your thoughts on the ending, on what happened. And I have like an overall question that sort of thinks about this whole story holistically. But the fact that she went through so much, and it seemed like her character was changing, right? And then we kind of almost revert back to status quo Helena. What do you think about this?
I was a little confused in the beginning. I was like, wait, what happened? So I had to kind of like read it a bit and then even read online. It's like, okay, so she set the guy up to be murdered by her family member. So like I get it, but yeah, like, and I think a lot of people kind of agree. I think where we're all heading emotionally is that like this feels like a complete. It's like all of this was kind of just to say the point that ultimately Helena doesn't change, and she's somebody who will always kind of want vengeance, and you wonder like to what extent does like learning about her parentage and stuff affect that. Like does that change her, or does that set her back? Like, will she be like this way forever? Like, did she? Was this meant to be like was this meant to be the final appearance with the Huntress? Which is I think about right now, because like, I think her next appearance, unless it's in Birds of Prey, was in Hush.
So look, she appeared in like she appeared like a few times between this and Hush, because I looked at like a list to see like, I wonder when she appears next, and like, I didn't read those books, but like it sounds like this was like ignored and like she was just Huntress again. It
was probably the Batman Chronicles, which they tried doing again around this time. That brief like series that kind of focused on the Bat family members. Because I don't know if she appeared in Gotham Knights, which would have started around this time. I don't know. At least up to this point, I don't know. Because like Hush was like my next immediate memory of her
when she changed her costume.
Yeah, which I like. I admit it's a kind of tacky costume, but I do appreciate probably the way Jim Lee drew it. Yeah, the ending leaves. The ending is one that like you kind of want Greg Rucka to explain, and you wish it spoke better of her character than I think it does, because it basically kind of shows you that like ultimately she we feel I think the same way that the question feels, unless you two feel differently.
She next appeared in Batman 591, then Detective Comics 763. Joker's Last Laugh 5, Robin issue 95, Joker's Last Laugh, Gotham Knights. So it was like business as usual. There's like a few appearances, the Batman Family miniseries from the early 2000s, and then Hush. Stella said something like she lets a murder happen, and it's like, I think that's very, very, very generous way of putting it. This wasn't letting a murder happen. She
basically put a hit on a guy.
Yeah, she put the hit on. She arranged the murder. She like went to that wedding and it's like, I need you to do me a favor on this, the day of your daughter's wedding, and like whispered, like led the guy there, said you should go into that room. You're not gonna get shot. I'm still digesting how I feel about this rereading this, because like my first instinct is I don't like it as an ending, because we've had years of her being like, Batman, why don't you trust me? Why don't you just let me prove myself? And then like Batman's like, all right, I know you're not a killer. I'm going to let you handle this. Just don't commit any murders. I promise, Batman. Then she goes to like a wedding. She's like, I need you to whack a guy for me.
It's almost as if Donovan was right the whole time. That's literally what happens.
I don't want to say she like betrayed Batman's trust, because like Batman's not like her dad in this continuity. Like he's not like
she did betray him.
He's not in charge of her. But yeah, like just this whole like, you're right. I'm sorry for ever thinking that you were a killer, Huntress. I know you're not a killer, so I trust you to finish this mission without killing anyone. And then Big Sage is like, what the hell? I sent you to the farm from Ninja Turtles and everything. We bonded over origins. Robin, stopped us from hooking up again. And then you killed the guy anyway. And then she's like, it's what I do. And then she throws her costume in the water, and like then the Skyfall theme starts playing.
I think this was probably meant to be her last appearance, and like editorial was like, we can put her a few more issues.
I feel like this is like the pilot for like her next like thing or something.
But she would never like work with anybody again if they found out about this. Like, I don't know if this is ever referenced again.
I'm gonna look up Batman 591 on DC Universe, which like that was another thing we were gifted at LA. Like Joe like pulled out from his like wallet, like here's a free membership for a year for you, a free membership a year for you, a free membership a year for you.
Whilst you're doing that, like what did you think about this?
Ed Brubaker wrote her next appearance too. So
okay.
It made me sad. Maybe it was inevitable that is what the character was going to do. I mean, Blood for Blood was repeated endlessly in this particular thing, and it seems like she cannot get over the betrayal of the family and what had happened. But to see her grow so much and almost find inner peace, and then to have that happen, it was just a tragic turn. And so I guess it questions nature versus nurture sort of situation. Like, is this just Huntress's nature and she cannot be changed? I don't know. I mean, this would have been the time to do it. So it just makes me sad. Was it the wrong decision artistically? Or, is it out of character? I don't know. I mean, I think inevitably this is what was going to happen, but it's sad and to see that she walks away almost from the vigilante life, it seems. Feels like maybe her faith has let her down, or perhaps she's not worthwhile to be one of God's children for whatever reason, throwing the crucifix there in the water. Some really powerful moments, but just quite tragic and sad and almost just, if this were, her last story, just seeing her alone, and I don't know what she would be doing on her own, but
I mean, I don't think that this is even kind of out of her character. I think that, like, and it's also, this guy knows who she is. He's threatening her. He's blackmailing her. So, like, there's a lot that she's kind of getting rid of. It's weird because, like, he was a bad guy, but he was also her father. But that doesn't really mean anything. Like, there's a few things going on here, and I still like her character. I mean, this doesn't make me think that, like, oh, she's a bad person or whatever. It makes sense, but it does suggest that, like, she's one of those, like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of things. Whereas, like, there's a nature in her that can't be altered, no matter how spiritual she might become, which is a pretty dark thing to say, and would suggest that, like, this would prevent her from ever working with the Bat Family again. And yet we know that, like, that's not true, which I think is an editorial thing more than anything else.
I just flipped through her next appearance, which was Batman 591, which was not quite a year, but like 6 to 8 months after this. And she's in her Huntress costume, like fighting goons. And Batman goes up to her asking for like information about a mafia guy. And she says, I thought we weren't on speaking terms anymore. And he says, we are. I guess maybe like you could imply from that maybe he like, froze her out again after he found out about this. But anyway, like the rest of it is like exposition. They're like fighting crooks. Is like she's like giving information about Lou Moxon, and then she says, "Do you need any help, by the way?" And then she like turns around and she's like, "He's gone." And then she says, "Big jerk," which like I was like, "Huh, Stella will like that."
This is just like Batman and Huntress by numbers with no interest in like what she went through in the story.
It is worth noting that she does not have her crucifix like visible in any of the panels in that story.
She has in the next costume though, right? In the Hush costume.
So I'm looking at her next appearance after this issue now to see if I doubt it's going to be anything special. Oh my God, this is drawn hideously. She's drawn hideously in this.
As he's looking for this, are there any other questions you want to tackle before I ask my last question?
The answer is no.
Okay. So does this story change your opinion of her?
Not even kind of. But my opinion of her is I've always liked Huntress. Like, she's always been like one of those Batman characters. Like, yeah, it's a Huntress, like she's violent and she kind of rebels as Batman, but like Nightwing and Robin like her. My siding with Batman is not me saying that like, I don't like the Huntress character or I've ever like disliked the Huntress character. I just think that like I grew up reading stories where everyone said she is violent and she knows nothing of honor or living by the sword. She is not of us. And there would be stories where that would demonstrate that. So, and I think that like I would just get a little weirded out why people weren't apparently. I guess people missed out on those stories, but like this to me was like a good exploration of her past and what kind of drives her. And even though the story kind of implies that like she can't change, that doesn't mean I don't like the character that she still is.
I guess it changes my opinion on her slightly because this is like killing someone. This isn't her killing like someone in the heat of a battle. This isn't her killing someone in like a fit of rage, during like a charged moment. This isn't her killing someone to save a life. This is her arranging a hit on a guy. Like this is premeditated, cold-blooded murder. But at the same time too, like I'm not going to hold it super much against her because like it's mostly forgotten about. For what it's worth, in her appearance after the one I just looked at, she still doesn't have the crucifix, and she's fighting with Sasha, which would like alongside her, which was like Bruce's bodyguard. And she like says this about Batman, which could be considered like a commentary on this, because Sasha's like, "Are you jealous?" And she says, "Hardly. I've tasted that apple and I don't want a second bite. Take a word from someone who knows Biddy Bat. You're not special. You're just another one of his tools. He'll use you until you're broken or until you break one of his rules. Then he'll get you killed."
We would be a little missing the forest for the trees to pretend that like every story is going to be 100 million% consistent and every writer has read everything, kind of carry things over.
Yeah.
And I think that like Huntress can be an inconsistently rendered character. Like Batman's an inconsistently rendered character. So you kind of got to like take what you like and take what is the most consistent and kind of work with that. I feel that like people just didn't really read this story, kind of didn't really take that into consideration, because I feel that like this story either implies that she's just like leaving Gotham or that she's not going to work with any of the Bat family again, which a lot of what this story was about. And that it's ultimately ignored, and that sucks. But like, it's like this, because this story Rucker goes a long way towards working with her, and it doesn't really pan out much. But nonetheless, it was still an interesting story to read, and I did dig it for what it was.
Yeah, my opinion of her hasn't changed, but my understanding of her, I think, has deepened, and I have more empathy for the character as well and what she has gone through. So I have appreciated seeing this character journey, even if at the crucial moment she reverted back. Well, now's the time when we give our rating. So out of 10 crucifixes, what would you give Cry for Blood?
Sorry, this took so long.
It's Huntress. What'd you expect?
Out of 10 crucifixes worn by Masato Katsuragi. No, Katsuragi. I'm going to give it an 8.5.
I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
And I'm going to give it, I almost gave it a 10 out of 10, but I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't imagine how much I would actually like it. Once I started reading it a couple weeks ago, I really enjoyed it. The art, the story itself, getting a deep dive into her history, some really intense character moments and interactions. I just thought it's a wonderful package. So I highly recommend it, especially if you're on the fence about Huntress, or maybe you want to learn more about her character.
Now let's never talk about her again.
I guess not with you anyways. There are no listener emails. I'm shocked. I haven't had any for a couple, unless they're in my spam, and I haven't checked. I do have some spam, but none are from any fans. So no listener email. So we are going to take a break. But when we come back, we're going to be reviewing the one and only Batgirl 93 or 41. But first, Zaius' Radio Hour, featuring Graveyard by Okay, welcome back for our final little push. We have Batgirl 41 or 93. It's Oracle Rising Part 5. Writer Cecil Castellucci, artist Carmine Di Giandomenico, colorist the beautiful Jordie Bellaire. Batgirl falls from a height into the river below, seemingly unconscious and ready to drown. On the roof above, Shark and Fox suddenly, and I do mean suddenly, join Oracle and congratulate it on the success of killing Batgirl. Oracle is suspicious and knows you can't underestimate Batgirl. That's the first person who's not underestimated Batgirl. Meanwhile, Vulture's watching over Frankie and seems to be in full-on Stockholm Syndrome, finally realizing the price they must pay to be working with Oracle. Babs regains consciousness and is literally/figuratively shedding Batgirl using a 15-minute rebreather to stay in the water for as long as possible. At the DC airport, but no specificity as to which one. So clearly, Cecil Castellucci just has never flown out from there. It's either Dulles or Reagan. Alejo needs convincing for some reason to go to Burnside, even though they didn't vote for her.
Weird.
So please see The Crown. Please see one of the episodes of The Crown season 3 for a similar situation, and the Queen apparently still regrets that decision to this day. Jason agrees to be the boots on the ground there since he just visited and immediately calls Babs. In Burnside, Oracle tells Operator that it is there to help Gotham, and Burnside by extension, I assume, and sits on the chair, mobilizing an army of little robots and rabbits and things like that to be the eyes and ears of the town. Back in the river, Babs's air has already run out, but she suddenly decides to swim to the surface and is found by a medic and a young Leslie Tompkins. She's put in an ambulance as a Jane Doe just as Jason passes, but doesn't notice, just, as those sorts of things work out. Oracle orders the trio to round up as many civilians as possible and put them in a warehouse, declaring that it will not abandon them as Batgirl did. Jason happens upon them rounding up said civilians and is knocked out and placed near Frankie. When he awakes, they have a short conversation about Jason's feelings for Babs. Then Oracle that's not the time for it. Then Oracle gives a monologue about Batgirl's failure and how Oracle will do better. Jason, who hates Batgirl now, offers his services, and Oracle agrees, listening to his advice on how to attract people to her side. Oracle sees a news bulletin where Batgirl's costume has been found in the water and begins looking in hospitals for a Jane Doe. At Burnside Borough Hospital, Batgirl, or Babs, is attacked by a robot but fends it off before being calmed down by Leslie and receiving a costume from her as well. Apparently she had one on stock. Batgirl puts on some scrubs and gets out of the hospital as Oracle. The trio and Jason arrive. Batgirl leaves a love note for Oracle, baiting it, and considers something that she would never do: rescue Jason Bard, which he was right there, so she missed it. Next, the race to save Burnside is on. Okay. Well, I don't know if you guys have been following along or not with this particular arc, so I guess we'll just ask questions in regards to this. But before that, I always like to talk about the art now. That's something that I like to do. So did you have a particular favorite panel in this issue? Panel or panels or pages?
My favorite panel was when she kind of washed up ashore and Leslie was saying don't leave it just yet, we need you, and it kind of goes to black. I'm not usually a fan of artists just copying and paste, Xeroxing the same panel. They've been doing that a lot. I remember first noticing that around Flashpoint, thinking this is mega lazy, but I liked the combination of the repeating imagery and the black panel kind of fading off. It was very graphic designer majory. So I kind of dug that.
I like when you see her struggling to get up to the surface, and I still have so much I want to do: be a better hero, citizen, daughter, friend, partner, maybe a mother. ... I like the way that was drawn.
Yeah, the underwater sequences, however strange they are narratively, were beautifully drawn. I also like the design of the cover and the acetate cover as well. And then I think it's page 16 where you have, I guess, Oracle fully formed and sort of Transformer or Megatron mode, where she is relaying to everywhere and talking about her. She's got her monologue going on, so just a pretty cool design there. If you've been reading this particular arc, do you have any thoughts going into this issue? Like, what do you think about the Oracle as villain arc? And also Batgirl coming back to Burnside?
I kind of fell off on this title. I had to read the previous issue before this and see how we got here. And I felt like we've not gone too much farther. It's kind of a mix of emotions. I think that the writing's fine. I think the artwork's actually really good. Conversely, I think that the art, I don't know if I would use this artwork for a Batgirl title. It's good artwork, but like I don't know, it feels, a lot of the artwork is kind of distanced from the characters. There's not a lot of close-ups to kind of show emotion. It's very, very kind of like a telescopic view. We're seeing a lot of things. It feels like we're not close enough, and like the details don't really show a lot of like reaction and kind of behavior from the characters. The colors are a little almost too warm, even though we're always kind of at nighttime, and like this sort of like technologically based storyline. I was a little bit more in line with the Hope Larson, Margaret Scott stuff, which is just a little bit kind of more close to home in terms of like, storytelling tone. I don't know. There's a lot. I was after reading Cry for Blood, which, there was absolutely a plot there, but like it felt that every ounce of those panels were drenched with characterization. This one felt a lot more, not to say that these don't have character, but like this felt a lot more focused and concerned with the plot rather than like, how much are we in Barbara's head? And then when we go to Barbara's head, it's usually like the same story of like, I'm a good, I'm great no matter who I am, which I feel like I've been told about a lot. It's fine. I
like that they called back to Gordon's Never Give Up.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I do like Castellucci's voice for Barbara the best in a long time. Probably the best since Fletcher. It really does sound like Barbara Gordon to me. Because usually there's lines that I think, especially with Gail Simone, this didn't really sound right, but like this sounds fine. But it's not, at the same time, it's not really hitting me in any sort of, I don't feel like I need to read this personally. It's like, it's okay. It's 2010's Batgirl by numbers. I know I told you this before, but like, this whole like, Batgirl versus Oracle thing, I know we've seen this before, so that element felt very repetitious.
It's interesting seeing Oracle as like a physical entity for Batgirl to fight, and I kind of like that idea from like a Saturday morning like villain type thing, or like it almost reminds me of like the feeling that you got from early Venom stories, like Venom versus Spider-Man stories, because it was this kind of piece of Spider-Man's like previous life that was now a physical entity from the fight. Does this mean that we're going to get Oracle, Lethal Protector, drawn by Todd McFarlane and stuff like that? So I totally love that. Mm-hmm. And Mark Bagley. I have been reading Batgirl on and off. Like sometimes I'll fall like a few months behind, and then like I'll read it all like in like a month or two. And I interviewed Cecil Cacciolucci recently at New York Comic Con about this. I like some of the stuff that she had to say, and like the Jason Bard stuff feels weird to me, but she's kind of picking up the thread that like the previous team left in terms of that, where they were like, he's redeeming himself and he has the hots for Babs. It is kind of weird for me still. Like, it's like, I mean, yes, I ship Dick and Babs, but I also like, Babs and Jason Bard because of the Bronze Age and stuff. But I just can't see this version of them together because, like, I can't get past what he did. And it's weird for me that, like, he's, like, allowed to, like, walk around and, like, be on this, like, campaign team with her. And then whenever she's like, oh, my God, it's Jason Bard. He, like, framed my father for murder. Everyone's always like, oh, Babs, calm down. Jason's like, everyone's, like, gaslighting her about it. Like, you shouldn't be upset that he tried to, like, frame your dad for one of the worst crimes possible. Like, you're being unreasonable, Babs.
What do you think about Oracle's monologue here? Is there any truth in what she says?
No. I mean, just no. It's a flimsy excuse for them to fight, but no.
yeah, I don't. Do you? I don't know. I don't really. Do you?
Do you feel like Batgirl abandoned Burnside? I mean, that is the center, I would say, of her point, her argument, because she's going to be there for Burnside when Batgirl abandoned it. So do you feel like potentially Batgirl did abandon Burnside?
I mean, now I'm thinking about, okay, she went back to find herself like the second time, And this refers like when she left for Asia, and then elsewhere. Then like she went to Gotham in the Margaret Scott run. I guess in a way, I mean, like I thought that she left Burnside in a pretty good place. Like I thought Burnside was kind of like fixed or safe. So I suppose
she did Gordon Clean Energy and stuff like that for Burnside.
I never got the sense that she just abandoned it. I thought that she like, you know, went traveling and kind of like, you know, took a leave of absence from it. But like, I don't know. I mean, it's Burnside's not really. Is it Burnside? Like, I guess it's still in Gotham. So like, you know, they need a hero. But
see, that's the thing too. I always assumed and read it as like it's a neighborhood within Gotham, kind of like how like the Narrows are. So like, it's not like Bloodhaven. If she's in Gotham, like because Burnside is in Gotham, if she's protecting Gotham, like Burnside is under that jurisdiction, and because it's just a neighborhood there, like she's always like 10 to 15 minutes away if like something happens. She's not like hours away.
But there's a bridge. I feel like it's more separated than you guys think.
Maybe.
That's true.
Either way, because it's within Gotham.
And she does pack up and move, right? And she lives in Gotham now?
Well, she moves out of the neighborhood, though. But like, it's kind of like how cities have certain
She moves out of Burnside.
Yeah. Burnside's a neighborhood. It's kind of like how like cities have like certain neighborhoods.
I think it's farther than you think it is.
So are you implying that you think that like that's the truth, that like she should never have left Burnside?
Oh, well, I mean, that's more of an editorial comment that I would put on there because they're trying to story Burnside and Frankie. Who knows if she's going to die? Gordon, everything from the Burnside run is being torched in a way. But she was forced to leave, I guess. You know, she left to follow Grotesque and then she just never came back. But I think about Kamala Khan and if she takes
New Jersey,
yeah, as her own, right? She is that here. So if she had left, would that count as abandoning New Jersey? If she just moved to go somewhere else?
For her, yeah, because there's a lot of that in there. I kind of just thought of Burnside as like, okay, well, this is where Batgirl is now, and this is kind of her version of Bloodhaven. Then like the editor's like, okay, she's in Gotham now, where she's basically been most of her life. So like, I don't know. It's like because Burnside is in Gotham. It's not like Bloodhaven, which is like a different city. So I never got the sense that like she.
I feel like it might be a different city.
No, I've never gotten that sense that it's not Gotham.
You have to take a bridge to get there,
which is weird.
Yeah, but there's bridges within cities, though.
I just thought it was like the hipster town in Gotham. I guess it's like
it's kind of like Greenwich Village in New York City.
Yeah, like or in Chattanooga, there's like North Chat, which is definitely kind of a hipster area. But like the bridge to cross there is like it's not a very long bridge.
Like I live in the city of Tampa, and there's a neighborhood that I live in called Hyde Park. And I can take a bridge to get from Hyde Park to downtown Tampa, and I'm still within the same city limits. But like, I've crossed a bridge to go from one neighborhood to another.
Okay, I'd have to do research if I wanted to continue this.
We could tweet at Cecil Castellucci.
Are you? I'm very open to be proved wrong.
Yeah, no, I think it would be. I would probably look at the Grotesque issue because I think it says how many minutes it takes for her to get to Gotham.
Let me go to the DC Wiki at Burnside and see if it says anything.
So I would say I think she did abandon Burnside, but not intentionally. Kind of like an abandonment light. But she left, and I think that she had set up shop, and she was their little hero down there. And so I feel like when you leave there is that absence. And so I think Oracle, in a sense, the same, but maybe a little more harshly than I would put it.
So this is 2 sentences long, and it's written by like a Wikia person. So like this isn't like officially from DC. So the weird thing is it makes my point, but it makes your point at the same time. Burnside is a Gotham City neighborhood. So there's my point right there. It's a Gotham City neighborhood located across the Gotham River, which is your point. Barbara moved there when she needed to take a break from Gotham. And I'm like, wait, what? She moved there to take a break from Gotham, but it's in Gotham City.
Maybe it's like Brooklyn. It's Brooklyn in New York City, maybe.
Right, but it says it's the Gotham soap. Yeah, so there we go. It's we're just as confused as before. I
guess. Jason Barr, do you think he's really going to take Batgirl down, or is there an alternate plan? Because all of it, this is a character change from one writer to the next, because the previous writer, Scott, had him really trying to ingratiate himself with Batgirl, and now he hates her. So there is a bit of a change. Do you think he really is going to take her down? Are we going towards a let's get rid of Batgirl against the police arc?
Nah, he's too schlubby to do anything effective. He's like Shaggy. I have zero confidence in him.
I think this is a trick. He's gonna fool Oracle, and then like, all right, Batgirl, now hit her in the sweet spot.
Okay.
You know, and then Barb will be like, gosh, maybe he really has changed. Then they'll kiss, and then I'll throw up.
Oh dear. I hope not, but I guess we'll see. And I don't know, the trajectory, I would agree with you if we were still, I think, in Scott's Jason Bard characterization, but it seems like we've changed a bit. I think we're going to get to a Batgirl outlaw soon. So, I don't know. Any idea why Batgirl stays underwater and removes her clothing for 19 minutes?
We're like the Oracle robot, like spider drones looking for her, spider seekers.
I guess Oracle could have scanned her, potentially. But why the clothing?
I got the idea that like this is still her like first quote unquote costume, right? Or like it's a prototype costume. So maybe it was like not really compatible for like scuba diving or underwater usage. So it was weighing down. Like, you know, it's funny. I never really questioned that.
Boy,
I was like, okay, I imagine this just makes it easier to have her swim.
Okay. I mean, that's as good an answer as I would. Otherwise, it's just very strange. I mean, she stays down there for the 15-minute rebreather plus 4 minutes extra. So it could potentially be sure that Oracle doesn't spot her. But then, yeah, changing, getting rid of everything, it was, yeah, just really interesting. Barbara says that Oracle, her Oracle, made me a hero, a better hero than I could have ever been without her. So I think this is a pretty bold statement for sure. And I know that there are people on either of those camps, I'm sure. What do you think of that?
I like the idea that she says she made me a better hero than I could have been without her. Like, and if in regards to like, you know, her being Oracle, not like, you know, this external thing, because it kind of proved her what her limitations were and what her, you know, potential was without the idea of like they running across rooftops fighting crime. So yeah, I'm in agreement of that. Like I don't think, and again, I like Barbara as Batgirl within reason. So you know, if we're insisting on this idea that like Oracle is an integral part of who Barbara Gordon is, then I'm down for that.
I don't like the context of it here because like I'm trying to figure out a way to articulate this. Like I agree with it, but I don't think that like Babs means it the way that I mean it. Where like I feel like as Oracle she had a wider reach and she was able to like accomplish more. But this is like I feel like the way that Barbara's saying is like, oh yes, like I wasn't a real hero until I was Oracle or something like that, or like being Oracle taught me how to be a good person where like she was a good person before, if that makes sense. So like I don't necessarily agree with that, but like I mean it reminds me of like, you know, since we're on the 10th anniversary special, like the discussions that we used to have with Kevin Cushing on like the Spider-Man crawl space message board over like, you know, is Barbara more effective as Batgirl or Oracle?
I was always very biased in those conversations. She's like, "Oh, it's Batgirl because I like her," and I was like, "Well, that's fine, but you know, engage with the question."
We were all very big mansplainers 10 years ago.
I'm sure. Yeah, I think it's an interesting quote. I think it's really big. I think in context of what's going on, obviously she's upset that this Oracle has perverted her original purpose, right? And we still don't know how she's been awakened, but there it is. Better, I think, is just the word that I would change. A better hero. Maybe more complete, more holistic hero. I don't know, but just better. As if, you know, she was only doing so much as Batgirl, but, which, you know, might be true, but I think she's doing something different as Oracle, potentially. So it's hard for me to compare it in that way. Any other thoughts on this particular issue? I'm assuming the next issue wraps up the arc, but I could be wrong.
It's Year of the Villain.
Indeed. Are you saying this is going to go for a year?
Oh, God, I hope not. I mean, not that...
Because it's already been dragging.
Yeah, that's not a statement on the story. It's just like, I don't like stories that last a year. Like, oh, God, I hope not.
I feel bad because, like, I this is not a run that, like, I am, like, thinking about too much. But when I kind of sit down and read it, it's like, you know, I don't really care about the story, but the writing in terms of like the character voice, I kind of dig that. I think it's a good voice for Barbara Gordon, but like I don't care about this plot.
Okay, well, what would you give it out of 10 bats?
6.5. 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with my general rating that I've been with a 7 out of 10 bats on this as well. Now over to Chris for his Cornucopia of Curiosities.
That's like having twice as many new episodes of your favorite podcast than usual and an extra stocking stuffer in your holiday stocking. Thank you very much, Stella. Hello, Bat fans. Welcome once again to the Chris's Cornucopia of Curiosities segment. Thank you very much for downloading, and as always, thank you for not fast-forwarding. My name is Chris, and I'm very glad to be with you. Today, I'm scrapping all previously planned content for this month, and I'm reviewing Batman Adventures Holiday Special number 1, and in the Night Watch segment, Nightwing number 66. Batman Adventures Holiday Special number 1 was dated January 1995 and had an original cover price of $2.95, and this was an oversized issue. This is available on the DC Comics app and Comixology at the time of this recording for the bargain price of $1.99. Apart from a one-page intro written by Paul Dini and art by Dan Reba, this issue contained 5 short stories, and I'll give a very brief summary of each of them. The Batman was created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger. Our first story is Jolly Old St. Nicholas, written by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, with art by Bruce Timm. It's December 3rd at Mayfield's department store, and GCPD members Harvey Bullock and Renee Montoya are working undercover as a Santa Claus and helper elf to catch shoplifters. Barbara Gordon is shopping for a gift for her dad and notices the cops in disguise, and then she surmises that there may be trouble. Barbara spies a child shoplifter, and it turns out there are several of them, as they converge into Clayface. Babs ducks into a dressing room, pricks a big toe on a pin, and adjusts her cowl and emerges as Batgirl. The fight goes outside, and Batgirl yells at the officers to shoot at Santa. Oh no, not Harvey, but an electric Santa display on wires. The officers oblige, and the wires fall and short out Clayface. But now, Harvey has the task of reaching into the gloppy form of the foe to retrieve the evidence. In the words of Harvey, ho ho frickin' ho. Next up, The Harley and the Ivy, by Paul Dini and Ronnie Del Carmen. It's December 17th, and Harley and Ivy crash a party attended by Bruce Wayne. As Bruce tries to avoid a group of women when he inadvertently is under the mistletoe, he's kissed by Poison Ivy, and is now reluctantly under her spell. The evil duo wastes no time going to Mayfield's department store and rack up purchases on Bruce's credit card. Bruce tries to fight the drug, and backing he falls down an elevator shaft. The Batman later finds Harley and Ivy at a toy store, and a brief but brutal fight ensues, but Batman manages to knock down a Christmas tree on the villainous pair. Next up, White Christmas, written by Paul Dini and art by Glenn Murakami. Mr. Freeze has escaped from Arkham. We get a 2-panel recap of Mr. Freeze's origin, and then Batman saves a mother and daughter from a potential car accident before he tracks down the villain to Gotham Cemetery. After an icy battle, Batman disables Mr. Freeze's freeze gun and asks Victor why he broke out. Mr. Freeze points to a headstone of his wife Nora, saying today is their wedding anniversary, and that Nora loved snow. And Victor says it would be sad if there was no snow this year, and with that, Mr. Freeze surrenders peacefully. The next story is What Are You Doing New Year's Eve? Written by Paul Dini and Bruce Timm with art by Kevin Altieri and Butch Lucic. On December 31st, Joker announces on TV that his New Year's resolution is not to kill anyone this coming year. As such, he only has a few hours left to kill as many people as possible. We find out Joker has stolen a hypersonic bomb capable of killing anyone within earshot, and he will likely use it at midnight at Gotham Square. When Batman arrives, to make matters worse, he finds several revelers wearing Joker masks. Batman does manage to find the real Joker, fight him during the year-end countdown, disable the bomb, and have a fallen bell encapsulate the Joker. Which brings us to our final 3-page story, Should Old Acquaintance Be Forgot? Written by Paul Dini and art by Paul Reba. In the early morning hours after the previous story, Batman meets Commissioner Gordon at a diner for their traditional toast to survival and hopes that they will make it through another year. Gordon orders a cheesesteak to go and asks Batman what he wants, only to find him gone and having left just enough money for the check. The end. For my notes, I don't recall Clayface being able to separate into as many as 4 different entities, each being independent of each other. The Harley Ivy story, the Clayface story, and the Joker story would later be adapted for the animated episode Holiday Nights for an episode of The New Adventures of Batman. It's implied that Nora Freeze is dead, even though in the episode Deep Freeze, it indicates that she was still alive but under suspended animation. Nora would later be revived and cured of her terminal disease in the animated movie Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero, and of course in current issues of Detective Comics. Renee Montoya's elf costume is kind of on the short side, and she does complain about the cold. I don't know what department store elves wear these days, presumably nothing quite this short, but I do recall elf costumes being quite short when I was a little boy in Memphis, which granted wasn't quite as cold. I certainly do recall many a pin being found on the carpets of dressing rooms back in the day in department stores. Speaking of women, it's nice that Renee, Batgirl, Harley, and Ivy get a significant amount of panel time in this issue. For the creative team, this is a deviation from the regular ongoing, and you'd associate most of the talent found here with the animated show itself. The artwork is outstanding throughout, as is the writing. Interestingly, Mr. Freeze is the only villain that appears on the cover, and although he looks very menacing, the cover itself is misleading to the array of good stories and what's inside the book. All of the stories were excellent and well drawn, with excellent facial work and stunning action sequences. The Batgirl Clayface story and the Harley Ivy story are my particular favorites. This, perhaps, is one of my all-time favorite Batman comic books. It just falls short of a masterpiece, but it's right up there. And I'm giving Batman Adventures Holiday Special number 1, 9 out of 10 bats. Now for everyone's favorite segment within a segment. It's Night Watch. That's where I look at the current issue of Nightwing from a shipper's perspective. At the time of this recording, Nightwing number 66 is the current issue. The Year of the Villain continues this month with the acetate cover and Talon and the Court of Owls. Spoilers ahead. Picking up where we left off in Nightwing number 65, Talon has placed goggles on Rick Grayson, which implants him with new memories of his past, including William Cobb, not Bruce Wayne, taking in Dick after the death of his parents. Dick then gets lethal training from Cobb and the Court of Owls, and being capable of killing without any remorse. What? Meanwhile, the other Nightwings do what they can with the fires and riots in Bloodhaven, only to be confronted by Talon at issue's end. To be continued. Current love interest B does appear, with a line here or there, and nothing really more than a cameo. With that, I am compelled to give Nightwing number 66 a cold, cold shipper alert. This concludes this edition of Night Watch. Listeners, don't forget you can hear Stella on the Required Reading podcast. I'd like to give a shout out to my friends at the Sullivans. Be sure to check out the Warlord Worlds, Tricker Talk, Xenozoic Xenophiles, Sensational Sleuths, Fantastic Fantasies, and the Convention Correspondence podcasts. Listeners, you can find me on Twitter at BTO and Batbooks. That's BTO and Batbooks, BTO as in Batgirl to Oracle, and Batbooks as in Batbooks for Beginners. The Batbooks for Beginners podcast is another podcast that I can be found on that I co-host with my friend Jerry. That's where we examine and review trade paperbacks and collected material of Batman or related characters. You can also find us talking about independent comic books, other titles, movies, and whatnot on the Professor Frenzy show. Please check it out if you're not doing so already. Please feel free to leave any comments for myself on this segment or for the podcast on the TBU website, and please leave us a good review over on iTunes. If you'd like to lend your support to the Batman Universe website that has news, articles, editorials, and a fine family of podcasts, you can make a donation on Patreon or a one-time donation by PayPal by following the links on the Batman Universe website homepage. Thank you very much for your support. Hey listeners, I'd like to wish all of you happy holidays this coming weeks and all the best for the year 2020. Sincerely, thank you very much for listening and your continued support. Will Chris be able to decide which issue to cover on the next episode? What plans does Stella have for her 10th anniversary and the coming year? Don't fail to listen to the next podcast where the answers to these snappy, snazzy, sneezeless, snobless, snoozeless questions will be snapshotted with a little snark and a snap and a snug snicker next time. Same Stella feed, same Stella site.
That's like an army full of reindeer from an enchanted forest in Frozen 2. Hi guys, this is Chris. And as always, thanks for not fast forwarding.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, the last segment is, because I haven't watched any anime, though I did start and watch 5 or 4 episodes with my nephew, but I have to complete that. Our literature recommendation. Do either of you have any books that you have read recently that you would like to talk about?
Indeed, I do. Actually, come back to me. I'm trying to recall when the last time I've been here.
Okay, Josh?
Oh, dear. Okay, let me look. Yeah, because there's been a few stuff. I've been reading so much nonfiction lately. I'm looking at my queue list. Ugh, I'm not even going to say the name of that because that's way too controversial for this podcast. I have started out of curiosity because it's a franchise that I've never really, a lot of people are really into, but I've never really dwelt into it too much. I'm about maybe 20% into Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, I decided after we got back from LA, I'm like, all right, I guess it's time to check out some other franchises. So I'm on Sorcerer's Stone, and it's not literature, but I'm on season 2 of Gilmore Girls. And yeah, so those are two things that I'm currently in the middle of doing. Not much has happened in Harry Potter, and there's not much I can say about it on here because it's like, I'm like at the beginning of the book, he's like just getting the Hogwarts. So I'm like, oh yes, it's really interesting. He's a wizard. And people are like, yeah, no kidding, Josh. We read those books like 15 years ago. Snape kills Dumbledore, or whatever that meme spoiler thing is.
Okay. So I've read a couple of books recently. Have you read, Stella, Let the Right One In?
Oh my, wait, Let the Right One In. I don't know. I haven't read it, but this is funny that you say that. Is this what someone else? No, it's How We Fight for Our Lives. Someone else. No, I have not read.
Okay, neither have I. But I've read.
What? That's not how literature recommendations.
Well,
go.
I've read that author John Ajvidi Lindqvist. I've read he's a Swedish author. I've read his follow-up work to that, titled "I Am Behind You." It's a weird, trippy book where some a group of people kind of go like camping, and like when they wake up, like there's nothing left. Like there's no trees, there's like no horizon. There's like it's like they're on kind of a blank line of existence, and they kind of go crazy. And it's a strange book, and it gets very violent near the end. But like it was a kind of interesting reading experience. And I also I followed that up with a mystery book called An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapina. That was okay. That was like, kind of like a whodunit murder mystery, kind of, people locked in a hotel, and they can't get out kind of thing. It was fine. It was all right. So those are the books that I've read. I would recommend I Am Behind You because that really was kind of an interesting experience. It was very kind of creepy and kind of like it was not really something I've read before. And like I said, this is this author of Let the Right One In, which is adapted for a film, which I believe he wrote the screenplay for again. And currently, I am in nearing the end of rereading Harry Potter: The Sorcerer's Stone, which I've not read. Really? I mean, I've read that before, but I've not read that since I read it the first time. And we're
reading that at the same time?
Yeah, it's true. Which part are you on?
He's like just getting the Hogwarts. He just I guess got fitted, and he meant I'm assuming they didn't say the name yet, but it's like the guy from Star Labs, Draco, whatever.
Draco Malfoy's in Slytherin, yes.
Yeah, he's like, oh, Hagrid, he's so hideous. Like the way that.
Yeah, I'm after like the Quidditch match, and when they see the dragon get born, but it's interesting reading that.
Thanks for the spoilers.
So that's what I'm reading currently.
Okay, I have a couple here. What is this here? One will be a Christian literature that I'm going to recommend. It's called Jesus Feminist, An Invitation to Revisit the Bible's View of Women by Sarah Bessey. And I'm going to have I call it a subversive feminist book club. We're going to have a meeting about it in next week, actually. Let's see here. Sarah Bessey didn't ask for Jesus to come in and mess up all her ideas about a woman's place in the world and in the church, but patriarchy, she came to learn, was not God's dream for humanity. Bessey engages critically with Scripture in this gentle and provocative love letter to the church. Written with poetic rhythm, a prophetic voice, and a deeply biblical foundation, this loving yet fearless book urges today's church to move beyond man-made restrictions and fully welcome women's diverse voices and experiences. It's at once a call to find freedom in the fullness, hope, glory, and work for Christ, and a very personal and moving story of how Jesus made a feminist out of her. So I recommend that if you're female and you have, I guess, any association with Christianity. This next one is called In the Dream House. It's a memoir by Carmen Maria Machado, and I recommend it, but just like Euphoria, I recommend it cautiously because it gets rough. and the language. So for years, Carmen Maria Machado has struggled to articulate her experiences in an abusive same-sex relationship. In this extraordinarily candid and radically inventive memoir, Machado tackles a dark and difficult subject with wit, inventiveness, and an inquiring spirit, as she uses a series of narrative tropes, including classic horror themes, to create an entirely unique piece of work which is destined to become an instant classic. And the idea is really just breaking out because we know, obviously, that there is heterosexual domestic abuse, and often the man is at the front of it. I said often, not always. But no one really thinks about, well, what about, these same-sex partnerships? There's also abuse. There's abuse everywhere that happens. So she sort of breaks into that. But there are some really amazing lines that she puts out in there. I think one of my favorite ones was when she went to the doctor, and the doctor said that she was overweight. She had to lose weight, and she said, I need to lose the 105
across the room
blonde-haired female that's sitting out there in the hall, and you're like, you really do. So just really powerful moments there. Then I read Every Heart a Doorway by maybe Shannon McGuire. And let's see here. Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children. No solicitations, no visitors, no quests. Children have always disappeared under the right conditions, slipping through the shadows under a bed or at the back of a wardrobe, tumbling down rabbit holes and into old wells, and emerging somewhere else. But magical lands have little need for used-up miracle children. Nancy tumbled once, but now she's back. The things she's experienced, they change a person. The children under Miss West's care understand all too well, and each of them is seeking a way back to their own fantasy world. But Nancy's arrival marks a change at the home. There's a darkness just around each corner, and when tragedy strikes, it's up to Nancy and her newfound schoolmates to get to the heart of the matter, no matter the cost. A bit of a novella, I would say. It's only 173 pages. You've got an asexual main character, transgender male character as well, though they don't name him that. But yeah, so really interesting. And they don't make focus on those characters, but they're just like, hey, they're just characters. That's who they are. And they move through, which I appreciated more so than, Let's Talk About Love, which I shan't recommend. And then finally, currently I'm reading Between the World and Me by Coates, so I can't fully recommend that yet. But I also read the first 3 volumes of The Umbrella Academy by Gerard Way and Gabrielle Ba, and I very much enjoyed those. So that's what I've been reading. In January, I guess I'll have to go through and talk about all of the books that I read and which ones were my tops in 2019. Do something like Professor Cheapskate. So that's our literature recommendation. And after about 3 hours or so, we have come to the end of the 10th anniversary. So as always, thanks to my 2 cohorts, and I'll give you the space now to pimp your ride and tell us where our listeners can support you. So Don, why don't you go first?
I just want to start off by saying thank you for having us on every year, despite your best intentions. Thank you for delivering this podcast to us. Thank you for enlightening us and educating us on this character. Thank you for your kindness and consideration when going to reading certain stories and inviting different voices on to converse with you. All the great hours of entertainment. The great interview you had with Scott Beatty, Chuck Dixon, Brian Q. Miller, Barbara Kiesel, Margaret Scott, and many others. I know you put a lot of effort in this podcast. You put a lot of emotion in this podcast, and it really has paid off. And I don't think you get enough recognition or credit for it, even though everyone basically loves you. You still put out a very top-notch podcast that is the best, right up there with the best of them. And I think that is worth celebrating for 10 years. And I'm glad that you're still going. And I hope that as long as it means something to you, you continue to make it what it is, which is an ever-evolving, very insightful show about a character that you love. And I think that's important.
Thank you so much.
You forgot to pimp your stuff.
Oh, yeah. Questions we don't have answers. Myself, the Chute Man, talking about anime and politics and women. So check that out at kinoissues.com.
And you're somewhere else now that you weren't a few months ago, weren't you?
Oh, you know what? That's true. I am a freelance contributor for DCUniverse.com. As of this recording, I have an article up there called Green Arrow, the original social justice warrior, talking about his Neil Adams 70 era comic book with Green Lantern, as well as many others. Yes, you can find my stuff on the news section of DCUniverse.com. We're right on a variety of topics from month to month, several times a month. And if you want to continue pumping my bank account, feel free to click those articles.
You get paid in clicks?
I don't know how. I do get paid.
It's a flat fee.
Oh.
So they have me, they have Donovan. So Stella, you are next. So we'll see if that'll happen this year.
Ominous silence.
Yeah, I know. I was like waiting for a reaction. But I was like, "You're net." Like, anyway, okay. I guess I'll pimp my stuff and then I'll do the big thank you thing that Donovan did. It'll be hard to follow his though because it was so long and heartfelt. You can find me on DCComics.com's news section and DC Universe, which is the service. DC Comics and DC, I call them sister sites, but they're like different, basically departments of DC, different editors. In fact, like it's complicated. Like Warner Brothers is a very big company, but I write on the news section for both of them and have been for over a year now. It's made my 2019 a lot different. I've seen a lot of things and grown in a lot of ways as a freelancer doing that, and it's been lots of fun. I'm not involved in this, but I do want to pimp out that, like, if you're subscribed to DC Universe, you should really check out Harley Quinn because the animated series, because it is awesome. It is hilarious. It's very raunchy, much like that burlesque show that we went to, except less tassels. So there's that.
Wait. There's actual nipples and such?
Okay, when I said no tassels...
It was violent.
Okay, when I said no tassels, I meant like meaning like it's like the burlesque show in terms of raunchy, but no, like meaning there's no nudity, no tassels. So no. Okay. I'm glad that you asked that because I should specify. And Damien is a sweet potato pie, which is a funny joke. And if you're a Dick and Bab shipper, they are in Young Justice season 3. There's a lot of shipping between them there. In fact, they are like the second to last shot of the show, I think, is like Dick and Babs like having coffee together at like Bibbo's.
It's honestly adorable.
Oh yeah. Like, yeah, there there is so much and spoilers there. Cassandra Cain's there. It's a dream. That's where you could find me. I'm just trying to think if there's anything like particular else because I mean, I guess we got to do a final episode of Gotham Chronicles sometime, but like, and Comic Book Film Review, we record that when everyone is available at the same time. But I'm not really doing much else in the podcasting world. So in terms of thanking Stella, I look forward to this every year. It's always a highlight of my December doing the anniversary show. There's always lots of laughs. And I love pre-gaming with everyone in LA as we, had lots of laughs at the Fast and the Furious ride breaking down and, little things throughout the trip, like Donovan admitting during the Connors taping that he used to throw pizzas. So,
finally,
fun. You could all listen to it. Like that was recorded by the WB people. We could probably like find it if we wanted to. So, Batgirl at Oracle, has been a huge part of my life. And I was even thinking about like, man, this podcast, because right now I'm at my parents' house, and because there was an event for my brother, and I was thinking like, oh yeah, Stella, like since she started the podcast, like she's like met my parents, like because I like said to my dad and Mindy, I was like, I'm going upstairs to record with Stella, so this podcast has brought us closer together, which I love it for that too. So happy 10-year anniversary, BTO, and as always, thanks for the spoilers.
Oh, thanks for the spoilers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because someone on Twitter actually made mention of Donovan's baby, that it's got to be a couple years since that baby was around as well. And I said, yes, thank you for remembering about Tomas. At least the stranger on Twitter remembers and not his own father. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, where is he, by the way, Don?
Somewhere here.
Yeah. You don't even know. CPS is on its way. Don't worry.
Dinosaur
okay.
CPS.
Well, thank you, of course, to you two for coming on and being unafraid to tackle some tough issues and incur my wrath if it needs to be incurred. So remember, you can always send any questions or comments to batgirltooracle@gmail.com. You can also find the show on Google Play and Stitcher. like the show on Facebook or follow it on Twitter at Batgirl to Oracle, and follow the Batman Universe on Facebook and Twitter as well. And be sure to support the Batman Universe by subscribing to Patreon. And once again, thanks to Mile High Comics for being my sponsor for 10 years as well. Thanks for putting up with me for sponsoring, my show, Batgirl to Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast. Remember that next week, well, actually, this will drop, I guess, on Tuesday. So that means tomorrow, if you're listening. So that is December 11th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be hosting a call-in show, and my Skype ID is Batgirl the Oracle, so you just have to message me. I'll put you in a little green room, and we'll pull you up one at a time. My co-host for that, helping me out, I'm ever so grateful to him, will be Chris, in fact, of his Curiosities, so I'm super excited about that. And what I want to know from you guys when I talk to you is a Babs origin story or a favorite Babs moment, favorite podcasting moment that you've heard on this show, and then any question that you want. So I look forward to talking to you guys because, again, you're 50% of the reason why I'm doing this. So thanks again for everything, and until next time.
Fly on, Babs lovers.
Babs lovers.
Yeah, there you go.
Just plain Barbara Gordon, masquerading for a lark as she rides into the night on her special Batgirl cycle. Who knows? Is the dynamic duo destined to become the triumphant trio? Only time will tell us more about this dazzling daredoll.
I love a happy ending, don't you?
The comics and set pieces here, they were actually used in the Jurassic Park films. Like this boat coming up to your right, that is from the third movie. And then on your left, that's the mobile lab from the Westworld with your Warren Prince back and Jeff Goldberg. Just for you guys, because we know you love dinosaurs. In cages on the right, we have dinosaurs. Don't worry, the cages don't. Wait a minute, cages are empty. Okay, don't panic, guys. As long as we don't hear the theme music, then we'll be okay. Music, something's about to happen. Oh, we gotta run for this.
Found it. Open wide. Give Mateus a baby brother.
Recognize those dinosaurs that just popped out at you. But they're both Lapin-Bertone.
I know! I'm recording all of this.
A great example of
turn it off!
There's like these trees on your left. These are fake. They're made out of foam rubber, painted, put some wheels on the bottom so you can roll them and the shot. It's all about illusion here in Hollywood.
Why didn't they tell me?